Today, I want to talk about something that gets a lot of people rattled. I receive a flood of messages from students who take the LSAT, and then when scores come out, they feel blindsided. Not because the test feels terrible for them, not because they froze, but because their official LSAT score comes back 10, 15, even 20 points lower than their practice test average. And if that happens to you, you are not alone and you are not crazy. Today, I'm going to break down what might actually be happening behind these surprising LSAT score drops, especially with the shifting LSAT curve. Here's the first thing we need to talk about when it comes to all these horror stories, specifically selection bias. And I know that selection bias sounds like a stats class term, but the simple version is when someone takes the LSAT and gets exactly what they expected, they don't go on Reddit and write a 10-paragraph breakdown about it. Nobody writes a post titled, "I scored what I thought I would," feeling meh. That post gets 0 upvotes. People also rarely post when they exceed expectations. Maybe they do once in a while, but positive experiences don't spread as fast or as wide as negative ones. That is just human psychology and social media dynamics. But when someone's score drops 20 points below their practice test average, that is shocking and it's unsettling. And it's the kind of thing people rush online to post about. So the first thing I want you to understand is this. Online chatter amplifies the extreme cases. I'm talking about the big drops, the weird results, and the LSAC conspiracy theories, but it doesn't actually reflect what's happening to the LSAT population as a whole. If your friend scored exactly their practice test average, you're not going to hear about it online. And if a majority of students match their practice test range, you're not going to hear about that either. You're only going to hear from the outliers. Now, there's this rumor going around that LSAC has made the LSAT harder, maybe to balance out the people who took the old LSAT with logic games, and that theory floats around all over the place. And my honest take is that it's not really likely, but it's also not totally impossible either. Logic games were easier for some students to perfect and they were harder for others. And so replacing logic games with a second score logical reasoning section helps some students, but it also hurts others. And that could, of course, even out. It could be a wash. And there's also been a lot of LSAT score inflation in recent years. And so LSAC could be adjusting the scale to compensate. And that is probably the biggest factor here, LSAC looking to adjust the curve, because the temporary LSAT flex format led to shorter tests, less fatigue, and higher scores. And LSAC has also significantly increased the number of students receiving accommodations for extra time, extra breaks, or both. So LSAT medians have skyrocketed as a result, and this is measurable. You can see this in the ABA 509 reports. Every single T14 law school now reports median LSAT scores of 170 or higher. And that is unprecedented. A couple of years back, a 173 put you solidly in the 99th percentile. Now, you've got to hit a 175 to be in that same percentile. And that shift alone tells you something major is happening with LSAT scoring. And so when score inflation gets out of control, LSAC has to respond by adjusting the scale, the so-called curve. This is the raw score conversion into a scaled score out of 180. And when that scale tightens, there are fewer wrong answers, separating a 168 from a 160 or from a 174 from a 166. So if you felt fine on test day, but 2 or 3 questions went sideways in each section, that could now produce a dramatically lower score than you were expecting. Not because you forgot how to take the LSAT, but because the bar has been raised. And of course, I know this feels unfair, and you might be thinking about retaking in January or February. And of course, if LSAC did tighten the scale this aggressively, and if they did it pretty quickly, that's not really fair because, of course, you've been studying probably for months, maybe years in some cases, based on historical expectations from the previously released LSAT practice tests. And I know it could feel disorienting or feel personal if your score comes back lower than you were thinking, but the hard truth is that it is what it is. Complaining isn't going to help you. Instead, we got to look ahead. So maybe you're retaking in January or February or even April, maybe even June. And if you are prepping for a retake, you're going to need a different strategy than what you used before. The new LSAT requires mastery of the hardest questions. That is the consequence of the scale getting tightened. You can't just get better at the intermediate difficulty questions because everybody gets those. The biggest differentiator now is how well can you handle the hardest logical reasoning questions on the exam. Students might crush the mid-range questions, the ones, say, numbered 15 in a section, but the questions numbered 20, 22, 24, the top-end difficulty ones, those are mattering more than ever, especially because logical reasoning is 2/3 of your score, and so any gains you make in your understanding of logical reasoning will be doubled across those two sections. And so if you're retaking in January or February in particular, your prep at this point should be focusing on identifying the 3 or 4 hardest logical reasoning question types for you, drilling the hardest variants of those question types, learning to spot trap patterns instantly, tightening your reasoning precision, and reviewing every single mistake with microscopic levels of detail. You don't need more practice tests, you just need better analysis of those tests that you are taking. So this could involve working on parallel reasoning questions, technical science questions, more abstract questions on philosophy, morality, aestheticism, whatever your least favorite type is, maybe that's what you've got to focus on. And if your score comes back and it's shockingly low, you might be thinking to yourself of getting a score audit. They offer score audits for, I think, $150. And that's a throwback to the old Scantron era when human error was more common. But because the LSAT's now fully digital, the chances of LSAC miscalculating your score are pretty unlikely. But if your score was so far outside your practice test range that it feels truly impossible, meaning your practice test average was a 170 and you scored a 150, you might want to consider the score audit just for peace of mind. But there are 2 important caveats when it comes to requesting a score audit. If your score changes as a result of that audit, whether it is higher or lower, the new score is final. You don't get to choose, and you cannot appeal it again. And almost every single audit ends up confirming the original score. So don't expect miracles for this. Do it only for peace of mind if you're truly sure that your PT average was way higher than what your score ultimately came back as. Now, if your score did drop, it doesn't mean you suddenly got worse at the LSAT or that your law school dreams are over, but you've got to look ahead now. If you are retaking in January or February, focus again on the hardest logical reasoning questions, review more deeply, anticipate tighter scaling. This curve is less forgiving than it used to be, and you've got to trust that you are capable of adjusting. Your LSAT score is not a measure of your self-worth. It's just a snapshot of your reasoning under pressure on a particular day. And while the LSAT as a whole is incredibly important, no one particular test date will make or break you because you can always retake. You can retake it in January or February. February and January are both not too late for this cycle, and it's well worth applying a couple months later with a higher score than in November with a lower score. And so if your PT average was higher than what you got on your LSAT administration today, when scores come back, know that it is worth retaking. If you can put another 6 weeks or maybe 10 weeks at worst, you can still apply this cycle, and it's probably worth delaying your applications for that. So I'm happy to take any questions that any of you all might have on anything at all that I've been sharing here, any questions you have about score release or how to prep for January, February, April, or June or beyond. Happy to take your questions and requests. We have a question here from Chanel asking, I take the June LSAT and I've been drilling twice a week, but I'm rarely maintaining. So you're taking in June, you've got plenty of time, right? There's no rush here. You've got what, 6, 7 months or so? That's plenty of time to improve significantly, but drilling twice a week, does that mean that you're only studying twice a week? You might need to put in more time. Are you only studying 2 days a week out of 7? Maybe that's not enough to maintain steady forward progress. Maybe you're just kind of treading water. So you might want to up that study time a little bit just to give yourself some more traction in this, because the LSAT is a test of pattern recognition, not memorization, but it takes time to learn and absorb the patterns, and you want to take it from your short-term memory into your long-term working memory. So maybe you want to increase those study sessions to maybe 3 or 4 a week rather than only 1 or 2. Now, I've been teaching these free live stream classes every single weekday at 2 p.m. Eastern. We're doing it a bit earlier today because of score release. I've gotten really into this drilling recently. I don't know how many of you have been joining for those drilling classes where we go over LSAT drills in particular. I think the flaw identifications are probably the most fun out of those. So I did a little prep for y'all, and I got some drill questions lined up for us to cover. And so I thought we might dig into a couple of those while we're killing time waiting for scores to come out. So I've got the first one pulled up here on the screen. We're focusing on identifying the flaw. And so take a moment, read the question up on the screen. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to something. So I'll read it out for those of you who are just listening. A short memo circulated at the firm notes that a particular junior associate was included in a brief internal review and that this junior associate billed more than 2,000 hours last year. The memo concludes that all junior associates at the firm billed more than 2,000 hours last year. Let's ID the flaw. A, assumes being reviewed guarantees every junior associate must bill over 2,000 hours. B, treats billing more hours and for membership as directly causing each other. C, concludes all junior associates match one briefly reviewed junior associate's hours. Or D, infers no junior associates work fewer hours because no memo mentions them. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but commit now, since of course you'll have to commit on test day. And if you're not sure how to spot the flaw in the mix of all the text there, one trick I like to use is pre-phrasing or predicting the answer for yourself in your own words, articulating it in your own words, and then it's easier to spot the more formal abstract articulation with all the legalese mixed in there. So I'll give folks a minute to drop your answer, just A, B, C, or D. I see some folks dropping in some answers here in the chat. And by the way, folks, if you asked a question about something I was covering earlier, I'll get to those after we cover the drills. So stick around and I'll get to those in a little bit. So I see some folks saying C, some folks saying A, more C's than A's, which is awesome because the C's have it. The answer is in fact C as in Charlie, Rob's, Rose, yours truly. I do really hope I'm saying that correctly. The answer is in fact C. This is your classic part to whole flaw. Just because a particular associate was included doesn't mean that all associates have that same characteristic. So just because one associate billed more than 2,000 doesn't mean that all of the junior associates billed more than 2,000. That one individual might not be representative. They could be the exception. Well done, folks. On to number 2. A note from the Career Services Office states that every student who submitted a complete application for Callahan's summer internship was invited to interview for that internship. L was invited to interview for Callahan's summer internship, so the advisor concludes that L must have submitted a complete application for Callahan's summer internship. Let's ID the flaw. A, infers L submitted a completed application solely because she received an interview. B, generalizes from L's interview experience to a conclusion about all internship applicants. C, concludes no student submitted an incomplete application because the office found none. Or D, treats interviewing with Callahan and being chosen for the internship as causally linked. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to something and try to pre-phrase or predict in your own words if you can. So we have the conditional statement. If they submitted the complete application, they were invited. That's the conditional in the first half. Then the second half, they say, because L was invited, she must have submitted the application. So that is an improper reversal, confusing necessary and sufficient conditions, mixing them up. We cannot assume that she submitted the application just because she received the review, because the application was sufficient to guarantee the invitation, but not necessary. So they're going backwards on the arrow, improper reversal. Not cool, can't do that. So the answer is in fact A. Well done, folks. Rob's, Rose, Lacan, yours truly, I do really, all saying A. Well done, folks. The answer is in fact A. I see Reeves, Brutal, Cherry Baby, Mother Witch, Mia, Jana, Tia, Arturus all saying A as well. Fantastic, folks. The answer is in fact A. Cynthia says, that movie always comes up. Yeah, it does, because it's the iconic pre-law LSAT prep and Harvard Law acceptance movie, so it's some good motivation. Whether you're happy or sad about your LSAT results today, might be worth watching that for some inspiration, especially if you're working on applications or applying for a retake. On to number 3, folks. A compliance memo explains that investigators have found no documented evidence that Jimmy overbilled any client in their review. On that basis, the memo concludes that Jimmy has never overbilled a client. Let's ID the flaw. A, treats this compliance review and future audits as similar in every important respect. B, generalizes from one investigation period to a conclusion about all client billing. C, treats Jimmy's workload and the absence of complaints as directly causing accurate billing. Or D, concludes Jimmy never overbilled a client merely because investigators found no evidence. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. And so try to prephrase or predict the flaw in your own words if you can. Easier to find it in the choices once you already have your own sense of it. I see some folks saying D, some folks saying C. I see someone saying that scores came out a little bit early for them in their email. So check your email if you might have gotten your score back already. If you have, just drop it in the chat where you're at. But in the meantime, so the flaw here is in fact absence of evidence, assuming that because we don't have any evidence, the evidence must not exist. Just because they found no documented evidence that Jimmy overbilled, does that mean that Jimmy never actually overbilled? Maybe he overbilled, but the evidence does not yet exist, but they weren't able to find it. So the answer is in fact D as in Delta. Well done, folks. I see here Rose, Lacan, Idarili, all saying D as in Delta. I see Malasha, Jay, Nick, Brutal, Cherry Baby, Mother Witch, Reeves, Mia all saying D. Yes, the D is in fact correct. That is the description of that absence of evidence flaw. Someone's asking why not B? B as in Bravo is describing a different flaw, the flaw of overgeneralization, but saying that just because it happened in one period doesn't that means that it happened in all cases. That's not what's going on here. The conclusion here is limited to Jimmy in particular. Now, choice C as in Charlie mentions the word absence, but it's not treating the absence of complaints as causing accurate billing. That's a weird distortion, but it's not describing the absence of evidence flaw in particular. And they're not treating Jimmy's workload as causing accurate billing or treating the absence of complaints as causing accurate billing. They're saying that because there is an absence, therefore Jimmy has never overbilled, when of course maybe he did overbill and there's just no evidence. Maybe he destroyed the evidence, or maybe the evidence was never created in the first place. And by the way, folks, did scores actually come back? Did they come out early? No, one person said that she got her results, but maybe they're kind of trickling out little by little over the next 10 minutes or so. By the way, if you have not received an email, maybe check your lsac.org account. Sometimes it appears in your account before you actually get it in your email inbox because there's a little delay, but the server is putting it in your account already, so it might be worth checking there. On to number 4. An analyst notes that a regional nonprofit organization has a flexible remote work policy and that a mid-sized software company also has a flexible remote work policy. The analyst concludes that the regional nonprofit organization and the mid-sized software company are similar in all important respects for forecasting long-term employee retention. Let's ID the flaw. A, treats remote work flexibility and retention outcomes as directly causing one another. B, infers broad similarity from both organizations, simply sharing a flexible remote work policy. C, generalizes from a few organizations' policies to all workplaces' retention situations. Or D, concludes no retention problems exist because the analyst cites no evidence of them. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. And by the way, folks, yours truly does say that it was in her LSAC account, even though she didn't get the email yet. So worth checking your account. So this flaw, I would describe it, if I had to articulate it, as being some sort of improper or overextended analogy. Just because they're similar in one way doesn't mean they're similar in all important respects. They could have one overlap in one area, but not in other key areas. And so that would be the articulation or prediction of the flaw. And so they are inferring broad similarity just because they have that policy for remote work in common, but they might be different in a lot of other ways. And so for that reason, the answer is B, in fact, as in Bravo. I see I really got it, Rose got it, Rob's got it, Giovanna got it, Farter Snail got it. Don't use that as your admissions related email address, by the way, but fine for a YouTube comment. So B as in Bravo is in fact the answer, folks. Well done. I see Cherry Baby, Tia, Mia, Brutal got it as well. Fantastic, well done. So that false analogy or overextended analogy. On to number 5. A brief internal note at the firm observes that whenever Lewis works past midnight on billing audits, the firm and its corporate clients frequently report positive feedback that quarter. The note concludes that Lewis working past midnight on billing audits causes the firm to receive positive feedback from corporate clients that quarter. Let's ID the flaw. A, generalizes from one quarter's audits to a conclusion about every quarter's results. B, concludes no billing errors occur because no note reports serious client complaints. C, treats Lewis's late night billing work as the cause of positive client feedback. Or D, assumes this firm's audits resemble every other firm's procedures in all key respects. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to something. So we've got a lot of folks here dropping answers in the chat. Love to see it. We've got here Tia, Pete, Reeves, Brutal, Victoria, Ressi, Jana, John, as well as Robs, Rose, Giovanna, all saying C as in Charlie. C as in Charlie is in fact correct. This is your classic correlation causation fallacy, assuming that because two things coexist, that therefore one causes the other. Lewis works past midnight, then there's positive feedback. Does that mean the working past midnight causes the positive feedback, or could it be a coincidence? Could there be a third variable? Could it be improper? Could it be a reversal? Maybe the positive feedback motivates them to work past midnight. So C as in Charlie describes it, though, assuming the causality in one particular direction. Well done, folks. So we're 5 questions in so far. Out of these 5, please drop in the chat how many you got right out of the number that you did. Give us an overall sense of your accuracy on these. And by the way, folks, just out of curiosity, if you got your scores back in the last few minutes, if you see them inside your LSAC account, do us a favor, just drop in the chat what you got, how you did. Are you above or below what you were expecting? Are you planning a retake? Just in general, folks, I'm curious to know when you're taking the LSAT. Are you taking it in January, February, April, June? Do you have a general prediction of when you might want to take this LSAT? Put a 1 in the chat for January, 2 for February, 4 for April, or 6 for June. You could also just put a question mark if you're not sure when you're taking it. But I'd love to try and better orient the conversation here around your actual target LSAT test date. And so I thought I would, in the meantime, I'll share some thoughts around some recent LSAT changes. This is me recording some videos live with all of you, and then I'll share some thoughts here. So today I'm going to walk you through 5 massive shifts happening right now in the LSAT world, shifts that are already reshaping who gets top scores, who gets into top law schools, and who gets the biggest scholarship money. These aren't small changes. These are tectonic shifts. And if you're not adjusting, you might feel it on score release day. Now let's start with the big one. It's LSAT score inflation. A 170 used to be rare, but now a 170 is the new normal among serious applicants. Top law schools are reporting record high LSAT medians. Every T14 law school is now at 170 or higher, and even mid-tier and regional schools are raising their medians. And this is not random. It's happening for 3 very predictable reasons. The first big reason is that more people are prepping seriously. Students aren't just picking up a textbook and hoping for the best. People are doing full diagnostic systems, tutoring, drilling, and personalized study plans. So you are not competing with casual test takers anymore. You're competing with people who've been prepping like it's their job. The second big reason is that extra time accommodations are more common than ever. Whatever you think about fairness, I want you to set it aside because this is just the reality of the scoring pool. The third big reason is that logic games are off the test. But now, the LSAT is more predictable, more preppable, and more speed-based. There is less material to study. With logic games off the test, you can double down on logical reasoning and see a faster boost in your score. And so, as for what you should do, study more seriously, aim higher than last year's medians, and if you want scholarships or T14, aim for a 170 plus. Of course, getting a top score does not guarantee admission, but not having it could shut doors. In other words, it might be necessary, but it's not sufficient. You also want to stop comparing your scores to old Reddit threads because those posts from 2018 are outdated, they're meaningless today. You want to compare yourself only to the current pool of serious LSAT applicants because that's, after all, who admissions is comparing you to. Another big shift is that the LSAT is now online. And that doesn't automatically make it easier, but it does change things. You can now take the LSAT at home or in person at a parametric testing center. And they both have their own trade-offs, of course. If you're taking it at home, it's more convenient, there's no commute, and it's a more familiar environment. Some cons, though, are that there could be more tech issues, more internet connectivity problems, the proctors freeze, or they lag, or they interrupt you in the middle. Your neighbor might run a leaf blower and make some noise. And the biggest one is that a proctor interruption at the wrong moment can destroy your performance. So if you want to avoid these issues, or at least the proctor issue, if the remote proctor interrupts you, ask them to pause the clock. They will not volunteer this, they don't even know what the LSAT is, but you've got to advocate for yourself. If you're taking it in person at a testing center, the benefits are that it's more controlled, fewer tech issues, no roommates interrupting you, and it's a more stable environment. However, you might have less flexibility. You've got to travel there, and you lose the benefit of your own home setup being more comfortable. Regardless of what you choose, you want to prep the exact same way you're going to take the test. If you test at home, practice at home on your real device. If you take it in person, simulate that environment as closely as possible. Maybe take the LSAT for a practice test at a library or a coffee shop where there's some ambient noise and other people around. You also want to use LSAC's Law Hub platform because that replicates the exact interface you'll see on test day down to the font, the line spacing, the color scheme, the functionality, the software. No third-party platform looks the same. Now, if tech issues worry you, just go in person because that can give you more peace of mind to know that you're not going to have a remote proctor. Now, another big change that we should talk about is that generic LSAT prep is dead. 10 years ago, you could take a random prep book, drill some questions, and land in the 160s, but that's not enough anymore. The LSAT's become more competitive. Too many people are prepping more seriously. There's too much high-quality information online. And so the students who win are the ones who use precision in their prep. That means you know exactly which question types cost you points. You know which sections drain your energy and why. You drill with intention and review in depth, not just doing a high volume. And you don't just hope it clicks, you make it click through your analysis. And so if you're aiming for a top score, your approach can't be to do 20 questions today. It's got to be something like, I'm doing only Flaw questions, only from published recent exams on Law Hub, meaning exams say 150 to 158. You're tracking your mistakes and fixing the underlying weakness. And that level of detail is what separates a 165 from a 170 or a T20 from a T14. And it separates getting no scholarship money from getting a full ride. So everything I've been talking about here, score inflation, online testing, the removal of logic games, these are not minor adjustments, and these are massive structural shifts. And the students who thrive in 2026 and beyond will be the ones who adapt early, build a system, and stay disciplined, not the ones who hope things stay the way they used to be, because the only constant is change. And so if you want the best scores, the best schools, and the best scholarships, the path is simple. You've got to understand the new LSAT format and adapt to it early and take full control of your prep. We've got Rob's commenting here. I've got a low GPA, so I need a competitive LSAT. Definitely true, couldn't agree more. You're going to be a so-called splitter applicant, relatively lower GPA. You compensate with a higher LSAT. A lot of students are in the same boat. And the good news is that law schools weigh LSAT scores more heavily than undergraduate GPA. And so your path forward to improving your odds of admission is pretty simple. Just aim for the highest LSAT score possible. And that's actually the case whether you have a low GPA or not. That is the single biggest needle mover you can make right now, the biggest change or impact you can make in your odds of admission. Get the highest possible LSAT score to improve your odds. And it's kind of funny how, your LSAT score is a single day, roughly 2.5 hours, and it weighs more heavily than your entire 4 or so years of undergrad combined. But that's the deal. Grade inflation is rampant. It's even worse than LSAT score inflation. And so law schools kind of discount the GPA because they know it's so inflated as to be virtually meaningless. And the best path forward is just to say, you know what, the LSAT's a more objective measure of your abilities. And so they're going to over index on that relative to GPA. So we have a caller on the line here. Dogman, what's going on? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's a little bit muffled. Hopefully that resolves. If you could try to just make sure you're not brushing against the mic, then I could try to do what I can to help you out. What's going on?
Yeah, no problem. Is it? I hope it's better now. Um, I was just looking for ways to get better at necessary assumption questions.
Yeah, sure. So necessary assumption, the biggest way I would study for that is by focusing on negation. So the correct answer choice when negated destroys the argument, leaving no ambiguity at all. And so you ask yourself, does this need to be the case? If it weren't true, what would happen? Because the necessary assumption is like a very specific kind of must be true question, meaning that a person who believes in the necessary assumption, believes in the argument and is logically committed to the argument, is automatically committed to all underlying necessary assumptions. And so you run through the choices asking yourself, does this need to be true? If it were not true, what would happen? And so the correct choice, when you negate it, it destroys the argument, makes it fall apart. It disconnects the evidence from the conclusion. So you want to ask, how is it possible for the evidence to be true, yet for the conclusion to be false? Whenever you're evaluating any argument, and then so you could, for any choice you're considering, meaning you've knocked out the obviously wrong ones, you're down to say 2 or 3, then you just negate each one. Is that making sense?
That does make sense, yeah.
Cool. And that's one of the most common types, by the way. The 3 most common types of questions on the LSAT logical reasoning are necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. And so it's great that you've ID'd one of those types to focus on. I think it's going to give you a lot of bang for your buck or a good return for your time invested there.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other challenges you're facing?
That's really been the first big stumbling block. I'm just having a little trouble getting through the answer choices and correctly negating, frankly. A lot of the times, if it's conditional, I'm just having a little trouble working through, but I think more practice will just help.
Yeah, definitely more practice is key. For a conditional, by the way, that's a bit tougher to negate. What you want to do for those is you ask yourself, how is it possible for the sufficient condition to occur, yet for the necessary to not occur? And so I would reframe it away from being a conditional. Instead say, rather than saying if A then B, I would say A requires B as your reframe or paraphrase of the original. So say to yourself, if A then B is translated to A requires B, then to negate that you say A does not require B. So you are negating the arrow itself, not the individual variables in this case, but you're saying, I'm going to say, I'm disconnecting the sufficient from the necessary and saying, if it's possible to have the sufficient condition without the necessary following, then the conditional becomes invalid. So you're just basically saying, we take requires and we change it into does not require. Does that make sense?
Okay. It does. It's really helpful, actually. Yeah, I'll just get back to drilling some more on those, you know.
Awesome, cool. Keep at it. If you ever need anything, of course, you could always email or text, and we're happy to help.
Good. Thank you.
Of course, take it easy, Dogman. Bye. Awesome, folks. So I know there were a lot of questions coming in from the chat here. I'm going to see if I can get to some of those. Apologies for neglecting it a little bit. Gina Lane asks, when I am running out of time but have some questions left, should I just guess for the rest? Short answer is yes. There's no guessing penalty on the LSAT. So you never want to leave any questions blank. Not like I think the SAT has a guessing penalty, but the LSAT does not. So you always want to bubble in something. And there is a little 5-minute warning on the LSAT. It pops up in Law Hub. And so that's your alert to check your pacing, make sure that you're on track. And if you have a bunch of questions unanswered, you probably want to bubble in something just so that you're not running the risk of leaving it blank, because once there's a blank and the section is complete, you can't go back, and you want to give yourself at least a 1 in 5 shot, right? But I think that the larger question here is, how do we get you to a place where you don't run out of time? How do we work on your pacing so that you can confidently expect that you will be able to complete all questions in the time allotted? So in logical reasoning, the questions are in a general order of difficulty, meaning they get harder as the section goes on. So you want to solve the first 10 questions in roughly 10 minutes or so, building up a time bank that you can then apply to the tougher questions later in the section. So that means you have an average of, say, a minute and 24 seconds per question. So devoting only 1 minute would be solving them faster than average. That way you have more than average for the harder questions later. In other words, you don't want to get bogged down on an easy question and then never get to the harder ones that truly need the time. And also recognize that every question is worth the same. So there's a delicate balance to strike here. Go faster on the easier ones so you have more time for the tougher ones later, but you don't want to spend 10 minutes on one question, right? There's a happy medium or a balance to strike where maybe you want to spend, say, 3 minutes on a hard question, but if you find that after, say, 2 minutes, you're not making headway, you're not getting any traction, you don't want to get stuck in the quicksand. You want to flag it, skip it, come back later. Even flagging 3 or 4 questions is totally fine. That's what I would actually do personally. I don't want to get bogged down in a tough parallel question or a technical science question. Apologies if you hear my dog barking in the background. But yeah, so you don't want to get bogged down. You want to keep making steady forward progress. And then when you get to the end of the section, hopefully with a 3 to 5 minute time bank or buffer, you could then go back to whatever you flagged or skipped earlier. And by the way, if you missed anything that I shared here, or you zoned out, as Rob's is saying here, this is all recorded on the YouTube channel at the same link you might be watching it right now. So if you're watching on TikTok, go to the link in my bio on there and you'll find my YouTube channel. You'll be able to access the link to this video or this live stream under the live tab on the YouTube channel, and you can watch the entire replay if you'd like. Question about reading comp pacing and running out of time there. Generally, the same principles apply. Reading comp pacing recommendations. So you've got an average of 8 minutes and 45 seconds for each passage plus the associated questions. And so if you round that to 9 for simplicity, I would divide it into 3 minutes on the passage read, 6 minutes for the associated questions. If you spend more than 3 minutes, you're not really giving yourself enough time for the associated questions. And so I would say limit yourself to approximately 3 minutes to read the passage and take notes. Then solve the general global questions first, like main idea, primary purpose, passage organization, best title, tone, author's opinion. Knock out all of those first. Then do the detailed questions that require going back to the passage a bit. And finally, save the more inferential questions for last. And if you have trouble with the dual comparative passages, maybe you do those last. It's easy to spot. And the passages are in some general vague order of difficulty, meaning that the hardest passage is rarely first, the easiest passage is rarely last. So keep that in mind, meaning don't do the 4th passage first. You want to generally go from easy to hard to build your momentum and your confidence up. We got someone with Farter Snail saying, I scored a 149, not ideal, plan to retake in January. Yeah, I definitely want you to aim higher. I think that any law school worth going to is going to want you to have a higher score. But you've got 6 weeks, and we're going to talk about January prep in a bit. But yes, definitely do retake. You at least want to apply with a 160 overall, I would think, for any school worth attending, especially to get yourself scholarships to get into better schools. But you're in the right place. I'm glad you're here. We'll keep covering some general advice. Will this cycle be the slowest historically? So speed of the cycle in terms of getting decisions back. I do think this cycle will be slow in terms of law schools rendering decisions just because of a couple of factors. The biggest one being that law schools are overloaded with applicants. Applicant numbers are up 50% over the past 2 years, meaning for every 100 people who applied 2 years ago, you'd have 150 people applying for the same number of seats. And law school admissions offices have not increased their staffing by 50%. They might increase it a bit, of course, but they've got an onslaught of applications to look at. And so the cycle will take longer for schools to render decisions. And so if you apply and don't hear back for months, that is the norm. It's not polite of them to make you wait so long, but it is what it is. So keep in mind that you might not hear back for several months, and it's worth sending a letter of continued interest. Meaning if you apply now, let's say your score came back today, and you're sending in your applications, and it gets to February, March, you still haven't heard from them, send a quick letter of continued interest is what it's called. You basically reiterate your interest in the school, give them any updates on your GPA in college increasing ideally, or a new accomplishment at work. Basically, you're telling them, I'm still thinking of you, and I really want to go to your school, and I'm impressive, and you should take me. Make it concise, make it clear. Don't overwhelm them, of course. Don't bombard them with letters, but do follow up with them to reiterate your interest. Question from Sage asking, what is a target LSAT score that could help with full tuition scholarships? A 180 could help, of course, but in all seriousness, you want the highest possible LSAT score, and you increase your odds of getting full tuition scholarships, aka a full ride, by getting an LSAT score significantly above the median of that school. And so if a school's median is a 160 and you apply with a 170, they're going to love that LSAT because it's 10 points higher. And so the higher you are above the median, the more scholarship money you are likely to get, and that only increases as your score gets higher. And so if you apply to a really low-ranked school with a 180, they might first worry if you're even really considering their school, but assuming that you can demonstrate serious interest, like let's say the school is low-ranked, but it is regional, and so you want to stay in and practice in that region, you have reasons to not relocate, you have connections to that school or that city, and you could reasonably convince them that you actually do want to go there, even though you are a really strong applicant considering your numbers, they might have reason to give you a full ride. So yeah, the biggest way you maximize your odds of getting a full ride is by having a super high GPA and a super high LSAT relative to their medians. And so of course, your GPA is probably pretty fixed in time at this point, but a higher LSAT can more than offset that. More questions here in the chat. Tia asks, do I need to sign up for the summer LSAT now if that's my plan? No, you don't need to. So let's say we're talking now in late November and you're taking the LSAT in June or August of this year. You do not need to sign up for the LSAT now. You have until whatever the deadline is, which is usually, say, a month or two prior. But it could give you some motivation to get more serious about your studying, right? So you make a serious investment in your prep by plunking down the $250 or whatever it is to sign up for the LSAT. And that's a concrete commitment for you to put in the work, give yourself some additional motivation to aim for the highest LSAT possible. But no, you don't need to technically. You have until the deadline. Got a question from Victoria asking, I take my LSAT in January. How often should I be doing a full practice test? I would recommend at least once a week. Ideally, we want you doing at least 10 full exams before the big day, so that test day itself feels like just another run through and you've done it all before. And so if you've taken 0 practice tests so far and you've got 6 weeks till your LSAT, maybe you want to do 2 tests a week for the next 6 weeks. That gives you 12 in total, pretty solid. Only do 2 a week though, if you can reasonably fit them in, not on consecutive days, because we don't want you to burn out. We want you to have adequate time to space them out and do some in-depth review and analysis of the questions that you're covering and having difficulty with. Hopefully you've taken a couple PTs already. If you're working full-time or in school full-time and you can only do 1 exam a week, that's okay too, of course. No need to burn the candle at both ends. But at least once a week, just so that you're getting familiar with the not only the content of the exam, but also the format, the timing, the pacing, the endurance. All of that matters a great deal. Kim is asking, and related to Dogme's question earlier, for the negation test, are we negating the conditional statements or the gap? you are negating the answer choices to see which one for necessary assumption here. The way the negation test works is you negate each answer choice, and the correct answer choice, when negated, will destroy the argument. And so you are negating whatever the answer choice was. So if the answer choice was all people who take the LSAT study for it, the negation is not all people who take the LSAT study for it, meaning some do not. If the statement was A requires B, or if A then B, we say A occurs without B, meaning A does not require B to follow. So you're negating whatever it is. You're negating the statement in the answer choice. So I hope that clears that one up. Farsi Princess is asking, do you save these lives? Yeah, so they're all the recordings of all these lives are on the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel. If you're watching on TikTok, the link is in my bio to go over to the channel. Then you click the live tab, and you'll see this live happening right now, as well as the recordings of all the previous ones. We got a question here from user 993 asking, will my undergrad GPA be a huge factor if I got my master's in my 40s with a high-level C-suite work experience? Okay, so no. So if you're in your 40s now, assuming that you did undergrad a couple decades ago, they're going to discount that heavily because who you were at 20 is not who you are when you're 40, right? So and you have a lot of other experiences since then to add additional context and give them a more recent sense of who you are today relative to who you were back then. So the farther out you are from undergrad, the less undergrad matters, meaning the less your GPA matters, and the more your LSAT matters in relation. And so all the more reason to, of course, shoot for the highest LSAT score possible to compensate for a GPA, whatever it was back at the time. Of course, time has passed, you have changed, you are a different person. They're not going to penalize you for who you were at 20 if you goofed off in undergrad and your GPA wasn't a reflection of who you are today. Just highlight your work experience and what you've done since then in your application essays and your resume, of course, to give them more context, more color, more flavor on who you are now. Let's do some more drills. What do you all say? I've got some more pulled up here for everybody. So I'm going to pull that up on the screen here. Let's get into number 6, more flaw identification. In an internal report, Lewis notes that the firm has no documented evidence that the proposed associate wellness program reduces burnout among junior lawyers. He therefore concludes in the report that the wellness program does not reduce burnout at the firm. Let's ID the flaw. A, claims one memo represents all memos in the firm. B, infers the wellness program and burnout share every feature because they share one. C, concludes the wellness program fails simply because Lewis found no supporting evidence. Or D, treats occasional agreement between colleagues as proof of one causes the other. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. And if you're not sure what the flaw is, try to just read the argument and articulate it for yourself in your own words. Easier to spot it in the choices once you already have your own concrete sense of what the flaw is. So to recap the argument, there's no documented evidence that the wellness program reduces burnout. Therefore, he concludes the wellness program does not in fact reduce burnout, just because we have no evidence that it does. So if I had to articulate for myself what this flaw is, I would say this is the classic absence of evidence flaw. Assuming that an absence of evidence means there is no evidence, therefore the thing is not the case. And of course, it is possible for the thing to be the case, even if we lack the evidence for it. So for example, and this is a classic example, but maybe a little bit controversial for some folks, I'm going to say it anyway, but just because we cannot prove the existence of God, does that mean there is a God, that there's no God? Of course not, right? So the absence of evidence does not prove there is no God, it just means that we don't have the evidence for it, but that does not have any bearing necessarily on the existence or non-existence, right? Maybe we'll get evidence in the future. Maybe we haven't been able to collect the evidence, but it's possible for there to be some at some point, maybe. So we're looking for the choice that describes absence of evidence flaw. Concluding, as choice C as in Charlie says, concluding the program fails because Lewis found no evidence. Maybe Lewis isn't good at looking for evidence. Maybe the firm is not good at gathering evidence. Maybe there is no documentation, but it is still effective despite the lack of a documentation. So the answer is in fact C as in Charlie. I see Giovanna, Idriang, hope I'm saying that correctly. Glenn all saying C as in Charlie, fantastic. I see that Anna John also got it. Gina Lane also got it. No need to weep. Gina Lane, you're good. You got it right. Miles got it as well. Fantastic. The answer is C as in Charlie. Nice. On to number 7. An internal note at the law school observes that whenever L studies the night before exams using a particular outline app, she later earns an A on those exams. The note concludes that using this outline app is what causes L's high exam scores. Let's ID the flaw. A concludes the outline app causes L's grades merely because they occur together. B claims lack of data on the app proves the app never helps students. C infers all students use the app well because a small group was reviewed. Or D assumes 2 students match in every academic feature because they share one. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So whenever L studies the night before using the app, she later earns an A. So to simplify further, there's an association between using the app and getting an A. Therefore, they conclude using the app is what causes L to get the high exam scores. So the app causes the A's. So there's an association between the two things. Therefore, they assume one causes the other. This is your classic correlation causation fallacy. Assuming that a coexistence or an association means that there's a causal relationship between the two. Could be a coincidence. Could be a third variable at play. We don't know the app is the reason why. Maybe she only uses the app when she is solid on that material. And that's the reason she got the A, because she's solid on the material. The app is just a coincidence or additional factor, but not causal in any way. So A as in apple is the answer, concluding the app causes the grades because they occur together. So I see Giovanna, Glenn, Adriang, Nat all saying A, and that's in fact correct. I see Miles got it as well. Anna John got it as well. Gina Lane got it as well. Fantastic. A is the answer. Well done, folks. On to number 8. In a short email to partners, Jimmy reviews a few recent clients he represented and notes that each complained about delayed court notices. The email concludes that all of the firm's clients experienced delayed court notices. Let's ID the flaw. A infers delayed notices cause complaints merely because Jimmy saw them together. B treats lack of records from Jimmy as proof delayed notices never occur. C assumes Kim and Jimmy are identical in all practice habits because they share one. Or D concludes all firm clients experience delays based on Jimmy's very small sample. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to something. And try to pre-phrase or predict the flaw in your own words first if you can. Makes it easier to spot it in the choices. So Jimmy reviews a few recent clients. Then on the basis of this small review, they draw a conclusion about all of the firm's clients. So they're jumping from a few to all. That's the hint there, kind of like a part to whole. Or they are overgeneralizing. So D as in delta best describes that flaw of overgeneralization, drawing a conclusion about all clients based on a very small sample. So D as in delta is in fact the answer. Well done, folks. I see Giovanna, Robs, Glenn all saying D. Fantastic. I see Miles, J. Joe, Anna John, Gina Lane, Jakayla all saying D as well. Fantastic, folks. D is in fact the answer. Well done. Next, on to number 9. An internal memorandum states that any applicant who scores above 170 on the LSAT will receive an automatic scholarship offer. Because one applicant received such an offer, the memorandum concludes that this applicant must have scored above 170. Let's ID the flaw. A, claims a small group reviewed represents all applicants. B, concludes that an applicant met the LSAT score rule merely from receiving the offer. C, infers two applicants share all traits because they share one. Or D, says no evidence of high scores means none were achieved. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. Note the presence of the conditional statement in the first half here. The word any is a sufficient condition indicator. Any applicant who scores above 170 will receive an automatic scholarship offer. If above 170, then automatic scholarship. Then we learn one applicant received an automatic scholarship, therefore they must have scored above 170. They are reversing necessary and sufficient conditions, going backwards on the arrow. If we were to diagram this, we could say 170 arrow scholarship. Then they're concluding scholarship arrow 170. Going backwards, not cool. B as in Bravo represents the confusion of necessary and sufficient conditions. Maybe there are other ways to get the scholarship aside from receiving the 170 plus. Maybe there are other ways to get the scholarship, like having a 4.2 GPA or having a judge write you a letter of recommendation. Could be one of those factors that had an impact, right? Not necessarily just the 170. 170 might not be the only way to get the scholarship, so B as in Bravo is the answer. Well done, folks. I see here Giovanna, Glenn, Nat all got it. Fantastic, well done. I see here Anna John got it as well. That's great. J. Joe got it as well. Awesome. Gina Lane got it also. Necessary and sufficient condition confusion. Sufficient is the variable before the arrow that is enough to guarantee something else. Necessary is the part after the arrow that is the requirement. On to number 10. A firm memo notes that both Harvey and Lewis lead large corporate litigation teams for major financial institution clients. The memo concludes they will manage client negotiations in exactly the same way and respond identically to any settlement offers. Let's ID the flaw. A, infers two attorneys match fully in negotiation practices from sharing one feature. B, claims lack of negotiation records is proof none occurred. C, says recent clients represent every client in the entire firm. Or D, infers one negotiation process causes another because both occurred together. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to something. I see the questions in the chat, folks. I'll get to those as soon as we wrap up this round. So we know from the evidence here, they both lead large teams, and they're concluding they will be similar in all these different ways. They'll manage negotiations the same way, they'll respond to offers the same way, just because they have one thing in common. Maybe they're similar in that one way only, but they're different in a lot of other ways. Just because two things are alike in one respect doesn't mean they are completely similar in all other respects as well. So they are overextending the analogy or over-indexing too much on the similarity between the two. So just because they have one thing in common doesn't mean they are similar in all these other ways, like negotiations and settlements and all that. And so for that reason, choice A best represents or articulates the problem with this argument. A is in fact the answer, describing that complete similarity. Just because they have one thing in common, they are overextending the analogy. So A is the answer, folks. I see Giovanna got it. Fantastic. This one's a little bit trickier maybe than some of the others. I see that Anna John got it, Sweta got it, Jakayla, Shelby, J. Joe. Fantastic, folks. Well done. A is in fact the answer. Nice. So we're 10 questions in so far. Out of these first 10, please drop in the chat how many you got right out of the number that you did. Let us know where you stand on your accuracy overall. And by the way, folks, If you find these sorts of classes helpful, I do these every single weekday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 a.m. Pacific time. We're doing it a bit earlier today just because of November LSAT score release, but we'll be back Monday covering all of this again. Same format pretty much, drills and LSAT prep advice, doing some open Q&A. So please spread the word about these. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these lives. The algorithm doesn't really boost lives because they can't run ads during them. And so I really appreciate your support, sharing this on social, sharing it to your feed, letting anybody else know who's studying for the LSAT. Really appreciate your support. Christina asks, are you still doing your class at 2 p.m. or is this it for today? So we're not doing 2 p.m. today, we're doing this time now, but we'll go for quite a bit longer than right now. We're not done by any stretch, folks. We're going to be here for quite a while, continuing to help folks out, but we'll be back again Monday. We're taking off for Thanksgiving and Black Friday. Spend time with your family. Hopefully you enjoy that, but we're going to reconvene on Monday, but we'll continue for now. I see Giovanna got 7 for 7 out of these drills that we did so far. That's awesome. Fantastic, Giovanna. You're rocking it. Love how you keep showing up every day for these. Some other questions in the chat here. Christina asks, how many times is too many times to take the official LSAT in your opinion? Well, there are LSAT retake limits. So you, of course, run against those. I think it's 7 for life, unless you appeal, of course. And you can appeal the retake limits, by the way. If you had a bad proctor, if you had a tech issue, you can appeal the limits. And of course, if it's LSAC's fault, they have good reason to grant you an extension. But law schools don't really penalize you for multiple takes. People have a lot of anxiety or stress around this, thinking it looks bad to take it a lot of times. And the truth is that, of course, all else being equal, better to be one and done. But all else is rarely equal, because if you could get a higher score through retaking, the higher score is what counts. The higher score is what goes to the American Bar Association, which in turn is where US News pulls their data from for the ever important US News Law School rankings. And so let's say you had a practice test average of a 170 going in, you took it, you got a 170, you might think, I got what I deserved, I'm good, I'm done. But there's what's called an LSAT score band, meaning there is a margin of error of approximately 3-4 points on each end, meaning that you might have a PT average of a 170, and that's your true deserved score or your current aptitude, but you might take it a different day, get a 167, take it another day, get a 174. And so maybe you retake and you get a 174 and you get lucky, and that's awesome, because of course a 174 will open far more doors and get you more money than a 170 will. So it's worth retaking in my view. And if you retook it and you got a 167, no big deal, because the higher score of the 170 is still what counts. The highest score on record is always what counts. And so for that reason, I would always recommend retaking. And in fact, I recommend that everybody retake the LSAT at least once, meaning you take it officially at least twice, because you could get lucky. The only time I wouldn't is, let's say your PT average was a 165. You took it and you got a 172. You got really lucky that day, of course, and then maybe that's higher than you quote unquote deserved. Maybe you want to just say, you know what, cash in, I'm good, I'm going to leave now. And that's fine. But in most other cases, I'd say it's worth retaking. There's no hard number, I would say. I think taking it 7 times is fine if that's what it takes you to reach your highest possible score. I'm not saying take it every single time it's offered. Don't take it in 5 consecutive administrations. Make sure that you're studying properly for each one and taking it when you truly feel that you are likely to hit your goal score. Don't take it randomly on a whim or just to see how you'll do. But I would never stop somebody from taking if they thought they could do better. Robs asks, what practice tests do you recommend taking, as you've mentioned the tests getting harder? The more recent tests. More recent is more relevant, more indicative of where the LSAT currently stands. And so the LSATs are numbered 101 to 158 in Law Hub. The higher numbers are more recent, and so don't do exam 101 at the expense of doing 158. If you have limited time, let's say you're taking the LSAT in January, focus more on the newer 20 or so, meaning 139 to 158. Focus on those exams specifically, because they'll be the best indication of the current modern LSAT. And get Law Hub Advantage. That's where you can find all the recent exams. More questions coming in here. Legally, Ketsy asks, when can you take the LSAT and how much is it? So you could take it 8 times a year. The upcoming LSATs are January, February, April, and June. Those are the next upcoming 4 administrations. January and February both are not too late to take it and apply to law school this cycle. So January gives you 6 weeks, February gives you roughly 10 weeks. Either one is not too late for the cycle, still good to take it and apply this cycle. The cost is approximately $250 to take it this cycle, meaning that you're taking it in the next few months and starting law school in August 2026. Victor asks, is there a general rule for how much time to provide for study for a 170 or higher? Is it 6 months? The more time, the better, up to a point, of course. Most people try to knock it out in 2 or 3 months, but it typically takes 5 to 6 to reach your fullest potential. Can you do it sooner? Yes, but it's going to be a bit more intense, compressed time frame. Everybody's different though, of course. Aptitude's a factor, your other obligations are a factor. And so if you're working, if you're in school, if you have family obligations, if you have kids, it's going to take a bit longer than if you had the liberty to do nothing but study full time. It also matters where you're at now relative to your goal. So if you take a practice test cold and you scored a 140, you've got 30 points to improve to get to a 170. In contrast, if you take a PT and you cold and you get a 160, it's not going to take as much work. So it's relative to your goal score, your current score, and the time that you can devote to this. And by the way, folks, if you're looking for help, if you feel like you want some guidance on your study program, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons to everybody out there watching this. Private one-on-one Zoom call with me personally. You can book that call at unpluggedprep.com/start. Link is below the video on YouTube. It's pinned in the chat. Also in my bio on TikTok. You can book that free call with me. Happy to help you out and talk through your situation in more detail. By the way, folks, don't over-index on that cold diagnostic. Don't see it as indicative of your self-worth. All it tells you is that you have not yet learned the LSAT, but of course you can. Use it as a benchmark for later forward progress. But don't take it as indicating your self-worth or what you're capable of or your intelligence. It only tells you how much you studied, and you can, of course, improve significantly as time goes on through more prep. It's a very learnable exam. It's a test of pattern recognition, meaning the more you understand the patterns of the test, the more familiar you are with them, the more that you will improve. Just scanning through some other questions here. Gina Lane says, Steve, anytime I take my time to answer questions, I succeed, but timed, I miss more questions. So yeah, of course, timing is a huge factor, right? It's not enough to get the questions right. You got to get them right under test day conditions, considering timing, pacing, endurance. And that's why it honestly drives me crazy when people just drill questions one by one, like they're in line for coffee, they're doing a question. That's great, of course, but it's no substitute for doing full exams. A full exam helps you work on your pacing so that you learn that internal rhythm of when to slow down, when to speed up, how to not get bogged down or stuck. And it also indicates for you, well, how to deal with the full endurance factor as well, right? Because you've got to do 4 timed sections back to back with only a 10-minute break in the middle between sections 2 and 3. So the solution to timing, pacing, endurance is to just do it more. That's why I say take 10 full exams before test day, so test day feels like just another run through. If you've only done isolated questions on your phone in line for coffee or on the toilet or whatever, and then you're doing a full sitting 2.5 hours, it's a radically different experience. Of course, it's going to go worse. It's kind of like if you were to run from here to the kitchen and then run a marathon. They're both running, and a marathon is just a lot of short runs chained together, but it's also fundamentally different. So you've got to do a gradual buildup from a single question to 100 questions in one sitting, because the LSAT is 100 questions in one sitting, and it's grueling. Your brain's going to be fried after that. And that's expected. But if you did 10 of them or you did 20 of them prior, then it wouldn't be nearly as bad. And that's why I think it's awesome that LSAC released 58 numbered exams in the actual test day format. They are available in Law Hub Advantage on LSAC's site for $120 for a year of access. And no, they're not promoting me. No, they're not paying me to promote this, but I wish they were. But it's well worth the investment because they only give you 4 exams for free. For an additional $120, you get 54 additional exams, roughly $2 an exam or so. And that gives you way more at-bats, more trials, more experiences of that timed sitting. But the only way to get better at it is to do it more and more. So devote the time for this. And yes, it is going to take 2.5 hours in that time sitting. So carve out a weekend morning, for example. Carve out Thanksgiving morning tomorrow if you can. Get it out of the way for the day, and then enjoy, guilt-free. But it's worth putting in that time. It's worth giving yourself that exposure. And when I see students' scores drop from the practice to the actual, a big part of that is often because they did not properly simulate test day conditions. So they did bite-sized questions and then added them together. But doing, say, a section a day for 4 days and adding it up does not make a full exam. Just like running a mile 26 times is not the same as running a marathon 26-mile run one time. They're radically different experiences. There's a saying that quantity has a quality all its own, and I think that's true here. So if you're going to retake, think about what you're going to do differently next time around. It might involve taking more timed exams, more timed sittings, more endurance prep, more in-depth review. If there's a resource or type of support that you thought of getting before but didn't get now, maybe now is the time to change it up. If you were just using LSAT for Dummies or some other old hand-me-down textbook, maybe you want to get a course or get some coaching to get some more guided, personalized support because the old book was outdated and contained mistakes itself. You don't want to use unreliable resources, of course. Get some proper guidance if you think that you need it, if you think that it could help you. Happy to take more questions coming into the chat here. I see Robs is asking, how do you recommend preparing for your free tutoring since it's only 15 minutes? So Rob's asking about the free call that you can book with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. Link below the video on YouTube, link in my bio on TikTok or pinned in the chat. There is no prep you need to do to book that free call with me. Link below the video. Just book the call. We'll talk through your situation and help you craft a plan of attack. We'll talk through whatever your pain points are, whatever your struggles are, and I'll help you craft your study plan going forward for whenever you're taking the LSAT, whether it's in 6 weeks for January, 10 weeks for February. No prep required. Just book the call and we'll figure it out from there. So I know we had some questions here regarding logical reasoning in particular. We talked about necessary assumptions. We talked about pacing, time management, review. And so I'm going to talk a bit about how to crush logical reasoning without memorizing every single question type, because people focus too much on drilling by type when the question type's only one part of it. You also got to understand the argument. So we're going to talk through the argument first approach here. Logical reasoning is now 2/3 of your LSAT score. It's 2/3. The old textbooks talking about logic games are outdated. Now logic games have been replaced with a second score logical reasoning section, which means if you improve your logical reasoning by 3 points, your overall score jumps 6 points across the 2 sections. So the question becomes, how do you actually get good at logical reasoning? Most people approach it based on the question type. They'll say, oh, this is a flaw question. Let me pull out my flaw checklist. Or this one says assumption. Let me talk about negation. But logical reasoning does not reward memorizing 15 different question types. It's really about understanding arguments. And so the process I teach my students is to first find the conclusion. What are they trying to convince you of? Second, find the evidence. What are they using to justify that conclusion? And third, what is the gap? What is missing? Where does the author make a leap? Where is the reasoning shaky? And once you start thinking this way, conclusion, evidence, and gap, you are no longer reacting to the question, you are controlling the argument. And as a result, everything starts getting easier. Now, most students overcomplicate logical reasoning because they treat question types like gospel. They think every type is a separate universe requiring its own set of rules. But the truth is that question types overlap a lot. And if you can get good at flaw questions, you're already halfway to mastering weaken, strengthen, and necessary assumption questions, because they are all asking about the same argument just from different angles. Flaw questions ask you, what is wrong with the reasoning? Strengthen asks you, what would make the reasoning better? And weaken asks, what would make it worse? Same core skill, but a different job description. And when you stop treating every question like a separate subject, your entire approach becomes faster and cleaner, and your score increases as a result. Now, the single most powerful review tool I've ever taught is the Socratic review method. Most people review by picking a choice, and they'll say to themselves, okay, I picked B, the answer was D, okay, I see why, and they move on. But that type of review guarantees that you will repeat the same mistakes over and over. In contrast, the Socratic review method flips the script. Instead of reviewing your answers, you review your thinking. You ask yourself, what's the conclusion? What evidence did they give? What was the gap? And why did I fall for the wrong answer? Why didn't I like the right answer? What trap did I fall into? And how do I avoid it next time? And when you do this consistently, you start spotting your patterns. Maybe you always pick answers that sound good, or you avoid ones that are too strong, or you miss subtle shifts in language. But once you see those patterns, you can fix them. And once you fix them, your score starts climbing fast. Now, there are approximately 15 different types of questions on the LSAT, but a few are more common than others. The top 3 to prioritize are necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. Now, a lot of students mix up necessary assumption and sufficient assumption, but they're asking for very different things. Necessary assumption asks, what must be true for the argument to work? What does the argument depend upon? If the assumption is false, the argument collapses. And these are pretty common, so you want to master them first. In contrast, we have sufficient assumption. This asks you, what new information, if true, guarantees the conclusion 100%? You're looking for the perfect plug to fill in that gap completely. Now, with inference, we've got must be true and most supported. And they sound similar, but they're not. Must be true is asking for something that is 100% provable from the stimulus, with zero wiggle room. If you can't point to a line that proves it, it's wrong. In contrast, you have most strongly supported. This has a different bar for validity. Roughly, you need only 90% provable, meaning it's very likely given the stimulus, but it's not airtight. Now, both of these fall under the category of inference questions, but they require different levels of certainty. If you mix them up, it means you miss both. Now we've got flaw, and we also have weaken. And students mix these up because they play very different roles. Weaken means you're not destroying the argument, you're just knocking it off balance. You are introducing something that makes the conclusion less likely, but still not impossible. In flaw, your job is to ID what is already wrong with the argument. And you're pointing out how or why. It's a different task with a different mindset. Now, of course, logical reasoning has changed. LSAC, when they removed logic games, they took those game style skills and put them into logical reasoning. So the logical reasoning now has more formal logic, more conditional reasoning, more numerical comparison questions about percentages versus absolute numbers, proportional reasoning, if-then chains, linking rules, because LSAC wants to test these same core skills, but they can no longer do it in logic games, so they do it in logical reasoning. So you want to build up those skills now, since they're showing up more often. Now again, to recap, the big 3 in logical reasoning: necessary assumption, flaw, and inference. If you're lost in logical reasoning, you start there. And once those 3 feel automatic and feel easy, then you expand into strengthen, weaken, parallel, resolve, and evaluate the argument. And again, of course, you can practice with all those old exams. 58 numbered exams, 101 to 158, and all of them have questions that are still completely relevant, so use them. Take full practice tests, track your results, look for patterns, then drill your weak areas using Socratic review, because your goal is not to just get questions right. You've got to build a mind that understands arguments automatically through pattern recognition. And that's going to pay off big time long after test day. Going back to the chat for more questions, feel free to keep dropping them in. I'll get to them as I can. I'm sorry, Godbook says I got a 135 and I'll retake this summer. I'll reach out. Awesome. Okay, so you got a 135. You know you're going to retake. Good move. In the summer, you've got roughly 6-7 months to improve significantly. Take a short break. You deserve it. But then come back to it, right? Don't neglect the LSAT. You don't want to get rusty on it. Maybe take a couple weeks off, but then get back into it. Take full advantage of the time because you want to improve a good 20, 30 points or more, right? So give yourself the time that you need to achieve your fullest potential, but you're in the right place. I'm glad that you're here. And just take that score as motivation, as a benchmark. for future progress to improve significantly. I see a question from Jana asking, I'm working in healthcare now and getting my paralegal certificate. Do you think it's smart to do this first before considering law school? I think it's a good move to get legal exposure to the practice of law. Do you need your paralegal certificate in particular? Not necessarily. But if you're not sure whether law school is right for you and you want to get a real world sense of what law school is, of what lawyering is like, what the practice of law is actually like versus pop culture representations, could be a good move to get some legal work experience. And so if getting a paralegal certificate is part of that process, then sure, go for it. But if you already know that you want to do law, then I'd say jump right in and just study for the LSAT. But it's never a bad idea to do your due diligence first and make sure that you are making the right move for your career based on your exposure to the actual practice of law itself, so that you know what you're going to be doing. Great questions, folks. Okay, on to number 11. By the way, folks, we do these classes every weekday, typically 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. We're doing it earlier today because of score release. Number 11, an internal compliance review notes that after searching 3 years of records, the team found no documented incidents of employees misusing the new expense policy. It concludes employees never misuse the policy. Let's ID the flaw. A, concludes misuse never happens because no records show it. B, treats one reviewer's notes as representing all employees. C, claims the policy causes compliance because misuse and compliance sometimes co-occur. Or D, assumes a few interviewed workers represent all workers. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to something. Miles says unproven versus proven again. Yep, you're exactly right. Awesome, Miles, you're getting this. Sweet. Give folks a minute here, but I see you're all getting it exactly right. So this is your classic absence of evidence flaw. Absence of evidence does not mean that we can conclude anything about what's actually the case. It just means we haven't found the documentation, right? So maybe there are no documented incidents, but employees are still misusing it and they just destroy the evidence. So maybe employees do misuse the policy, but we have not yet found the documentation. And so for that reason, this is your absence of evidence flaw, which lines up with choice A. I see here Giovanna got it, Nick Halcoro got it. Awesome, I said it correctly this time. Let's see who else got it in the chat on TikTok over here. We got Pashi, Miles, Unknown, Jana, Wolf, all saying A. A is in fact correct, folks. Well done. Describes that absence of evidence flaw. Nice. On to number 12 here. A managing partner notes that in the last quarter, 2 attorneys brought in significantly higher billable revenue than any others. The partner concludes they are similarly suited in every respect to lead future high-stakes litigation. Let's ID the flaw. A, concludes 2 attorneys are alike in all respects based on revenue. B, infers litigation outcomes from a small group's revenue trends. C, claims results prove another caused firm improvements. Or D, treats missing data as evidence of lacking qualifications. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So we have evidence here about the revenue specifically. And because they brought in higher revenue, therefore, they are similar in every respect to lead future high-stakes litigation. So they are broadening beyond the revenue that these 2 people brought and overgeneralizing or overextending the analogy to say what the litigation outcomes will be. It's an overly broad conclusion here. They are overextending the analogy. Just because 2 things are alike in one feature, can we draw a conclusion that they are alike in all important ways when it comes to the revenue? This one's a little bit trickier. If you need another minute on it, I'll give you that additional minute. I see Miles says overgeneralization. Miles, that is exactly right. Awesome, you nailed it. They are overextending the analogy, going a bit too far here. And so you want to find the choice that talks about overgeneralization in particular. So Miles, you got the prephrase here. Do you want to drop what answer you think it is that reflects the flaw specifically? The prephrase or prediction is the first step. The next step, of course, is to find it in the choices, if you can. So they're concluding about litigation outcomes, right? With evidence about higher revenue. So for that reason, B as in Bravo is the best fit. They are inferring litigation outcomes based on the revenue trends. They shouldn't have done that. It's an overextension of the analogy, going too far based on one similarity. So B as in Bravo is in fact the answer. I see Abi got it. Fantastic. Exactly right. This one's a bit trickier though. Yeah. Let's keep going on to number 13. A memo states that every student in the top 10% receives a prestigious clerkship interview invitation. Because Warner received such an invitation, the memo concludes he must be in the top 10%. Let's ID the flaw. A, claims Warner must meet the condition because he received the outcome. B, treats an interview as proof that other students caused ranking shifts. C, uses Warner as a sample to generalize about all students. Or D, treats missing records as evidence he lacks qualifications. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to something. So we have a conditional here, right? The first half. If top 10, then invitation. So 10 requires invitation. Top 10 requires getting the invitation. Warner got the invitation. Therefore, must he be in the top 10%? No, of course not, right? Because that's confusing necessary and sufficient conditions, going backwards on the arrow, improper reversal. Maybe there are other ways to get the invitation aside from being in the top 10%. And they've gotten a little bit confused. So improper reversal of conditions, necessary and sufficient. So choice A best describes that. Well done, folks. I see Giovanna got it. Fantastic. I also see on TikTok, a lot of folks got it. I see Jay got it, Kiki, Jana, Ciara, Ayana, Chana, Legally Ketsi, all got it. The answer is in fact A. Well done. Miles says, I saw percentage and jumped the gun. Yes, you want to be careful, right? You want to read all choices thoroughly and read the argument thoroughly as well. So they mentioned top 10%, but that's the only number referenced, is top 10%. They're not generalizing from a percentage to an absolute number or anything like that. So we have to look at the conditional. So in the beginning, they say every student. Every means all, means any, means this is the sufficient condition. All of those are equivalent. Every, any, all, they all mean sufficient. So if is the sufficient, if top 10%, then invitation. Then the conclusion, of course, is where they go wrong. They say if invitation, then top 10%. Going backwards on the arrow, improper reversal, so A is the answer. Well done. On to number 14. Over the past year, Jimmy's practice has repeatedly seen sharp increases in new client inquiries during months when he runs large billboard ads. A marketing note concludes the ads cause these inquiry increases. Let's ID the flaw. A, concludes billboard ads cause inquiry increases because they occur together. B, uses Jimmy's single month of ads to generalize about all client behavior. C, claims Jimmy's missing data shows the practice never misreports revenue. Or D, A, concludes billboard ads cause inquiry increases because they occur together. B, uses 1 month of ads to generalize about all client behavior. C, claims missing data shows no misreporting ever occurs. Or D, treats two attorneys as identical due to one shared statistic. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to something. we have your classic association, correlation, causation, flaw, right? We have increases in inquiries when they run the ads, therefore the ads cause the inquiries. So association between billboard ads and more inquiries. Does that mean the billboard ads cause the inquiries? Of course not. Maybe there's a third variable. Maybe it's a coincidence. Correlation does not guarantee causation. So choice A best describes that flaw. I see Giovanna got it. Fantastic. I see also Ayana, Ciara, Chana, Jana, Legally Ketsi all got it as well. Choice A. A is in fact the answer. Well done on these drills. And these, of course, are not real official LSAT questions. Due to copyright, we can't display them here. That would be a violation. We'd get in major trouble for that. We don't want to get sued. So these are just fun drills to get you warmed up. On to number 15. A manager speaks with 3 employees who volunteered for a productivity workshop. All report feeling more efficient. The manager concludes all attendees will experience meaningful improvements. Let's ID the flaw. A. Concludes all attendees improve based on 3 volunteers. B. Claims the workshop causes gains because improvements and attendance co-occur. C. Treats missing feedback as evidence of no issues. Or D. Asserts 2 employees share all qualities because they share one experience. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to something. So evidence regarding 3 employees, conclusion about all attendees. They are extending from a few people, a limited sample that of course might be unrepresentative, to all. So as Miles says, sample error, that is exactly right, is a sampling error. They are over-indexing on just a few of them, broadening over generalization. So what, of course, is the flaw describing that? I see here, folks got it, choice A, concluding all of them improve based on only 3 volunteers. So the A's have it. I see here, Giovanna got it, Noam got it, fantastic. I see Ayana got it as well, Jana got it, Kiki got it, fantastic. Yes, the answer is in fact A, well done. B is describing something else. B says correlation causation, something a bit different here, but yeah, I could see the case for that one as well, but I think the bigger issue here is going from 3 to all. 3 to all is the big overgeneralization, but yes, you could say there's a bit of potential correlation causation issue there as well. Nice, well done. So we're 15 so far, folks. Out of these 15, please drop in the chat how many you got right out of the number that you did. Give us an overall sense of your accuracy on what you've covered so far, so we have a sense of where you stand. Are you 15 for 15? Are you 12 for 12? If you missed a couple of them, just drop in the chat how many you got right out of the number that you did. Give us an overall sense of where you stand. I see Miles is 13 for 15. That's awesome. Super high accuracy. Kiki's 3 for 3. Fantastic. Birdman says, I love LSAT questions. Awesome. Me too. You're in the right place if you love LSAT. Pashi, if you have a question on a previous one, you could book the free call with me through the link in my bio. We could talk through it more there. We're going to keep going forward. We can't go backwards, unfortunately. So please, if you have questions, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons to everybody out there watching this. You could book it through the link in my bio on TikTok, link below the video on YouTube, or in the chat on YouTube pinned as well. Unpluggedprep.com/start. I'll be happy to help you talk through your situation, help you craft your plan of attack for the LSAT whenever you're taking it, whether it's January, February, April, or June. I see Giovanna is 10 for 11 in accuracy. Fantastic. I see that Legally Kessi's 3 for 4, Ciara's 5 for 5, Kiki 3 for 3. Fantastic, folks. You're all doing great on these. Now we've got our caller coming in here. Dr. Giri, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. How you been? How's everything coming along?
Very good. Thank you. It's with my tutor, Timothy. He's a great guy. We're doing the one-on-one tutoring as well as the practice tests, mostly concentrating on reading comprehension as well as LR. The part of LR which I was having problem with was the conditional agreement, the arguments, and especially mapping out the conditions and trying to understand the so-called, they may fall under the sufficient versus the unnecessary, and you can't go from one side to the other. A equals B, A and B equals D, so that doesn't necessarily mean the other way around is also true. So that's, yeah, we're doing good.
Awesome. I'm glad it's all helping. Is there any particular challenge that you're facing where you're looking for support right now?
Yeah, I mean, the important thing is going to be just doing the practice as much as possible, so that in no matter what questions I face, my approach remains the same, um, and try to avoid the tempting answers which are not correct, and not getting tricked by some of so important thing is just keep doing practice, I think.
Exactly. Practice is key, right? So we're looking at the same approach regardless of question type. So in logical reasoning, for example, what's the conclusion? What's the evidence and what's the gap between the two? If you do those three things, regardless of question type, you have a consistent step-by-step approach. And of course, the questions are asking you for different things, but first and foremost, you read the argument, you understand it for yourself. If you can do that, it's much easier to spot the correct answer in the choices because you already understand the argument thoroughly and you know what the gap is.
Yeah, the part active reading is the one that Timothy is really asking me to concentrate on, like not to sort of get lulled into complacency, so in so exams and anxiety of the doing under time, but active reading and understanding the argument. I think those two are the stage which I really could use more work. And once you understand the argument, then finding the answer becomes a little bit easier.
That's exactly right. It all comes down to what is the argument actually saying, what is in the text, what is in the passage. If you know that, the questions become a whole lot easier. But what too many students do is they read the argument, they don't really get it. They look at the choices hoping that will clear things up, but it actually only makes things worse because everything only makes sense in the context of the argument. So they're asking you to strengthen or to weaken or to ID the flaw.
Yeah, yeah.
If you don't know what the argument said, how can you ID the flaw or how can you strengthen something you don't know what it's saying? So first and foremost, just read the argument, try to paraphrase it in your own words, dumb it down. How could you explain it to a 5-year-old, for example?
Yeah, yeah. And of course, the other part which I find it a little bit tricky is that um, the way the question is structured is also important in the sense that every one of these is true except, and that you have to kind of reframe it saying, okay, except means this one is not true, or that must be true, must be false. Different questions, which are means that you have to approach it in a simplify and then approach, um, not to fall into. Those are such silly traps, but it's you kick yourself when you fall for it.
Of course, of course. And that's why the LSAT is a test of pattern recognition, right? So the more that you drill these questions, the more that you practice them and understand them, the more you will absorb the patterns subconsciously so that when you see a new question, you will be able to more easily relate it to all the similar ones you've done in the past. And that's how you get faster because you're not reasoning through that type of reasoning for the first time. You've seen it all before. The window dressing is different, but the underneath it all, it's the same skeleton.
Yes, yes. Any advice, Steve, that you, since I have you on the phone, is any advice you would give to just approaching or doing better, improving on your reading comprehension part?
Yeah, of course. I mean, in a sense, the whole LSAT's a test of reading comprehension, right? But I would say that if there's a passage you're encountering where you don't feel like you really understand the text that well, as a drill, as an exercise, you might take the entire passage and rewrite the entire thing in simpler language. Like you're taking it from a college level text to an elementary school level text. Like you could explain to a 5-year-old. Can you just break it down and simplify it as concisely as possible in as simple vocabulary as possible to prove that you truly get it? Because some of these passages are tough and they use very convoluted wording, and your job is to disentangle that.
Yeah, yeah.
So you might take some older passages and try that out.
Certainly. A few other things that I have sort of been doing is that firstly, resisting the temptation of highlighting everything. That doesn't get you here or there, and understanding and always keeping in mind, in the back of mind, that what's the main point? What are they trying to say? What's the reasoning? What's the tone? Um, and that once you are writing the summary of that particular paragraph, that seems to help a little bit. Um, and the um, questions, like 70-80% of the time, they always ask about the main point of the exam. They always ask about the whether do you think the author of passage A or passage B would agree or disagree with the following points, and they'll have, and that means you need to have a really good understanding of what that paragraph said or what that author meant, so that you can say, okay, this point is going to. That's I need work on that, and I need to keep that in the back of my mind when I'm reading the comprehension. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. So that comes down to reading for structure, right? So when you look at each individual sentence in a passage, are they expressing the author's viewpoint, somebody else's viewpoint? Is it evidence or details or supporting examples?
Mhm.
Is it a particular group? So you want to bucket the information that you're reading and put it into one of those categories. You don't want to get overly bogged down in the details. When you see details, you note them, but you speed up on those because you can always go back to those later. But the overall global big picture points, like the thesis statement, you want to zoom in on that because that's key to understanding all the global questions.
Exactly. Exactly. Quick question, Steve.
Yeah.
Um, in the exam time, I unfortunately have been approved for accommodation time. So I have a time and a half. Um, my approach has been the same, kind of keeping minute 30-40 seconds for each question. In fact, earlier question was a little bit quicker, but question 15 onwards, it becomes more difficult and takes more time. Um, and approach has been like, even if it meant that you could only do, let's say, 20 of the questions, the last five you use generally the letter of the word and finish it that way. Um, what's your approach, Steve? What would you say if someone who has a little bit extra time, like my case this time, how would you really recommend? What would be your strategy to tackle the part of the exam?
Of course. So if you have extra time, then take advantage of that, right? You're no longer constrained to a minute 25 per question. I mean, what is the nature of your accommodations? How much extra time do you have?
Time and a half.
Time and a half. Okay, so we're going from 35 minutes per section to 53 minutes per section, which means going from roughly a minute 20 to roughly doing math on the spot here, never a good idea. We're adding on what another 40 seconds, so we're getting to 2 minutes,
Yeah.
right? So we're getting to 2 minutes now. So that means you can afford to slow down a little bit, but don't slow down too much because you do want to complete this section, right? So I would say when you're down to the last 5 questions, you should be able to solve them now with the extra time, I hope. Never guess randomly. Ideally, you're going faster on the easier ones to build up a time bank for the tougher ones later. So you can give yourself a minute and a half per easy question and give yourself more like 2.5 on the harder ones. So still maintain a fast enough pace that you're doing the easier ones faster than you plan to do the hard ones. So my standard recommendation is a minute per easy to have roughly 2.5 per hard. Now we're going to up that to say you're going to have 2 minutes per easy question and maybe closer to 3 minutes per hard question. But still move it at a conscious pace. So still be conscious of how you're allocating time and still flag the hardest ones so that you can skip them and come back to them later so that you will be able to complete the section. So don't get stuck in the quicksand.
Mhm. Mhm. Last question, Steve, if I can. Um, lately, I have been doing the practice exams, one every week, and the course, the exam score has been sort of slowly coming up, and days that I do really well, and I feel great. But then there are dips and plateaus. In a sense, there are exams which I don't do very well. Um, what's your approach for saying, let's say, um, to A, become more consistent, and B, um, not to get like discouraged by if you get not good results, in a sense. Uh,
Yeah, great question. Okay, so fluctuations are normal, totally normal. I've never seen a student whose scores didn't fluctuate. LSAC has a score band or a margin of error of roughly 3 to 4 points on each end, meaning that if your true score is a 170, you might get a 167 one day and a 173 another day. So you have a range of 6, 7 points. That's normal. That's to be expected. So don't over index on the low scores or the high scores, meaning don't get too cocky if your scores are high one day, and don't get discouraged if your scores are low one day. Take the average of your most recent 5, and that's going to be the best indication of where you stand. Also remember that while the LSAT as a whole is incredibly important, of course, no one particular test date will make or break you. No one practice test will make or break you because, of course, you can always retake. And if you're taking January, you've still got February as a backup. And so for peace of mind, you could even sign up for February, not planning to take it, but just so in the back of your mind, you know that if something goes terribly wrong on January's LSAT, you've got February lined up and you could still take it.
yeah, yeah. This is something that February may be just too late for this year's cycle, but
It's not true. February is not too late. February is totally fine. The cycle has extended over time so that you might see information outdated from 5, 10, 15 years ago when the cycle was earlier, but it's extended over time due to all the recent changes over the past few years, such that February is totally fine. You could take it in February if you need to. I hope you don't have to, of course. We want to knock it out for you in January. You've still got 6 weeks, plenty of time. You're in the boot camp, so you're getting more intense prep. But worst case, you've got February if you need it.
Thank you.
Of course, Dr. Gary. Anything else I could help you out with?
No, great. You've been very helpful. Thank you for the course, and I really look forward to completing this part.
Of course, my pleasure. Keep out if you need anything, reach out.
Likewise.
Of course, bye. All right, fantastic questions from Dr. Geary, one of the students in our LSAT January boot camp for the prep. I see some other questions popping up here in the chat. Noam asks, is a 164 a strong enough score for UCLA law? I would think it's probably below their LSAT median. I don't know all the medians off the top of my head, but it's probably below. So I would aim higher, of course. If you have a super high GPA, maybe you can get away with a below median LSAT score, but why put yourself in that situation? We're still early enough in the cycle that you can take it in January or February and look to up that score. Ideally, I'd want you to have a 170 probably for a school like UCLA just to maximize your odds of getting it and also getting scholarship money as well. Giovanna asks, do you recommend reading the stimulus, meaning the argument, before the question or vice versa? Great question. So there are plenty of top scorers on both sides of this debate. Some people like to read the question stem first. Some like to read the argument first. Back when I was studying for the LSAT, I liked reading argument first. But since then, I've changed it up and now I read question stem first. I like question stem first because I think it's more intuitive, meaning that you know what to look for going into the argument because you have your perspective set for you, meaning if it's a flaw question that you know that your job is to ID the flaw. If it's a strengthening question, you know reading the argument to look for the gap and then strengthen the argument. If it's an inference question, you know that your job is not to evaluate a gap or a flaw, and there may actually be no argument at all. It might be a fact set. So it tells you how to go about the argument. It tells you what to look for. It tells you the proper perspective to go into the argument for. So that's why I like reading question stem first now, even though I used to like reading argument first. Val asks, how do you join the LSAT bootcamp? So we only allow folks to join the bootcamp typically by invitation only to make sure it's going to be a good fit. If you're interested in joining the LSAT bootcamp that we're running, you can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. Link is in my bio on TikTok, pinned in the chat on YouTube, and below the video in the description on YouTube as well Happy to help you talk through your situation and check whether the bootcamp is the right move for you. Jay asks, where can I find practice tests? I have to do a diagnostic. So you can find them. The best place is LSAC's Law Hub platform on lsac.org. You go on there and you can access 4 practice tests for free. And you can get more if you pay $120 a year for Law Hub Advantage. That's the best place to find a previously administered official LSAT practice test. Gerard asks, when you negate something, are you looking for an answer that weakens or strengthens the argument? So when you are negating, we're doing this specifically for necessary assumption questions. We are checking to see whether a given choice is required by the argument, meaning it is an underlying necessary assumption. When you negate, the correct answer choice when negated will destroy the argument, leaving no ambiguity at all. And that's how you know that it was required by the passage in the first place. Manhattan asks, if I didn't apply to law school with a score of 169, do I lose it in 5 years? So LSAT scores are good for 5 years, meaning that they are valid for 5 years. After 5 years, your LSAT score expires, and you would need to retake the LSAT to have a valid score on record for admissions. 5 years is a good amount of time, of course, but if you took it back in, say, 2019, and you haven't taken it since then, you're going to have to retake it to apply going forward. Jonna asks, if you have a decent GPA, talking 3.0 to 3.5, and you get a high LSAT score, can that give you a better chance at T14? So always the higher the scores, the better. The higher the numbers, the better. And so if you want T14, you want to have a 170 plus LSAT because all of their LSAT medians are 170 to 175 or so. Their GPA medians are 3.8 to 3.9, meaning that if you are below on the GPA, which you might be with the 3.0 or the 3.5, you want to balance it with a higher LSAT to compensate. So again, GPA medians for T14 law schools, meaning the top 14s like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Columbia, Cornell, NYU. Those are all pretty high GPA medians, of course. And so you need to balance that by getting the highest possible LSAT score to compensate. So if your GPA is below 3.8, you want to have above a 174, ideally, to maximize your odds of admission. Some folks are saying the link for the free tutoring lessons not working for them. I apologize for that. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start. That's how you could book the free LSAT tutoring lesson with me. If you're not seeing it on TikTok for some reason, you could find it on the YouTube channel as well through the link in my bio. New Zealand says, I got 11 out of 27 on a reading comp section. What does that tell you? Tells you want to improve on reading comp, right? You want to boost your reading comp performance, right? So you want to ideally be close to perfection in general to have the highest possible LSAT. And so might be a pacing issue, time management. Are you running out of time? I mean, what's the reason that you're getting 11 out of 27? Is that you're not having time, or you are having time, but you're getting questions wrong? Because those are two different things, right? Yeah, so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to say, okay, well, is it pacing or is it accuracy? If it's accuracy, can I get them all right untimed? That's the first step. Can I get them? You got to get them right untimed to get them right timed. So accuracy first, then pacing, then endurance. That's the proper sequence of events. First, you work on your pacing, then your accuracy. Then first work on your accuracy, get them right. Then you get them right under timed conditions. Then you do them chained together for full-length practice tests. New Zealand says, I felt like my reading speed was great, but I think it was accuracy. So yeah, make sure that you're actually understanding what you're reading because you got to know that to get the questions right. That's the first step. Great questions here, folks. I love these. All right, so let's keep going. Now, some folks ask about the writing sample. The writing sample is unscored, so it is not nearly as important as the scored portions of the LSAT. But people still worry about it, and law schools do still look at it, and maybe they're looking at it more often because of the use of AI for writing application essays. Application essays are probably going to be worthless soon because they can't trust that you actually wrote it. Even if they say not to use AI, people still use it anyway. They can't really tell. So today, I'm going to show you exactly how to ace the new LSAT writing sample, which is the argumentative writing sample, if you're taking the LSAT in 2026 or beyond. And I know that it looks simple, it feels low stakes, but it's quickly becoming one of the most misunderstood, most overlooked parts of the entire LSAT experience. And I want you ideally walking to test day knowing exactly what the LSAT writing sample is, what law schools want, what traps to avoid, and how to write something clear, organized, and persuasive without overthinking or wasting time. LSAC made a major shift a couple of years ago. The writing sample is now argumentative, not descriptive. It's evidence-based, not preference-based, and it's analytical, not reactive, not reflective. And so the older prep books are outdated. The Reddit threads from 2017 also outdated, and random blog posts explaining the old writing sample are completely irrelevant. The new version focuses on something very simple. Can you read source material, create a clear argument, acknowledge counterarguments, and write like a functional adult? That is it. You don't need literary flair. You don't have to sound like Shakespeare's lawyer, and you don't need to pull a legally blonde Elwood's filibuster. You've just got to show basic argumentative competence. The LSAT writing sample used to be basically ignored, and schools needed it, but almost nobody read it. But in 2026, it's becoming more important, not because law schools changed, but because you changed. You now have access to artificial intelligence. 10 years ago, the only way to get polished personal statements was to hire a boutique consultant for thousands of dollars. But now, you can clean up your writing using a free chatbot in 3 seconds. And admissions knows this. They are not naive. And so the writing sample is their one chance to see how you organize ideas without help, whether you can build a logical argument, whether your grammar is functional, and whether your writing ability matches your polished application essays. You don't need a masterpiece, but you do need alignment. They're going to be asking, does this sound like the same person who wrote the rest of the application? If the answer is yes, you're good. But if the answer is, there's no way a human wrote this personal statement, the writing sample becomes the red flag. So here's how to succeed on the writing sample. First, you want to be clear and concise. Short sentences, clean syntax, simple vocabulary. You are not trying to impress anybody. You don't want to drop a random 5-syllable word in the wrong context. The second rule is to follow the instructions exactly. LSAC gives you source material, and so you want to use it explicitly. Quote, paraphrase, reference, whatever. Just use the information they provide. Don't bring in outside examples. Don't reinvent the assignment. And don't wander off into your personal story about how college changed your life. You want to stay inside the bounds of what is required. Now, you've also got to address the opposing side without switching sides. And this is the part students misunderstand. Acknowledging counterarguments does not mean arguing both sides, changing your mind halfway, or writing a balanced essay where no one wins. It means stating what the other side believes, explaining why that's reasonable, showing why your side is stronger, and that's it. That is the exact skill you're going to use in law school, weighing arguments and making a clear call. You also want to make a clear thesis and stick with it. You pick a position early, you announce like you mean it, and you stick with it all the way through. Wavering is going to translate as confusion, and lawyers do not waffle. They pick a side and they stick with it. Now let's look at LSAC's official sample prompt, the one about the purpose of college. The prompt gives you several perspectives. One argues that college should prepare students for careers. Another argues for the value of a broad liberal arts education. Another emphasizes societal or civic benefits. Your job is to pick a side and argue it using their material. So let's say you argue the primary purpose of college is to prepare individuals for career success. Here is how you would structure it. Paragraph 1 is your thesis, 2 to 3 sentences. You state your position. You give a quick preview of your reasoning. For example, maybe you say, colleges should primarily prepare students for career success because this aligns education with economic realities and student goals. It's clean, it's direct, with zero fluff. Then in paragraph 2, you make your strongest argument. You use the source material to support your main point. You bring in one piece of evidence or reasoning from LSAC's prompt. Then in paragraph 3, you give your second argument with another reason, another piece of evidence. You're still drawing from the provided perspectives. Then in paragraph 4, you address the opposing view. You acknowledge that the liberal arts perspective has value. Then you explain why it's less compelling given your thesis. For example, while a broad education can produce well-rounded thinkers, the evidence shows that students overwhelmingly expect college to lead to employment, and institutions should meet this primary demand. It's clean, it's respectful, and it's forceful. Then, in paragraph 5, you give a concise conclusion, just a sentence or two where you restate the thesis with no new ideas, no new evidence, no dramatic ending. You just close the loop and you stop. Now, people will ask me, how long should this be? Of course, you are not writing a dissertation. You don't get any extra points for length, and you do not need creative flourishes. Ideal length is 5 paragraphs, 300 words. It's short, it's clean, and it's organized. It should feel like a structured email written by somebody who has a brain. That's all you need. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect. Law schools do not expect perfection. They only expect competence. So you're showing you can follow directions, you can read, you can organize ideas, you can argue a position, you can acknowledge counter arguments, and you can write in normal functional English. That is it. And at least through June of this year, 2026, this will not be scored. LSAC has said they will score it in the future at some point, but not this cycle. So for now, focus your energy on logical reasoning, reading comprehension, accuracy, pacing, endurance, and review. That is what your actual LSAT score is resting on. And so if the writing sample stresses you out, remember that nobody is expecting genius. They just want to see the real you without AI, without a consultant, the actual human who shows up in their classrooms in a few months. So keep it simple, keep it structured, and keep it human. You've got this, that's it. Max asks, if I took the LSAT already and I'm retaking it in January, I don't have to redo the writing, correct? Correct. You do not have to redo the writing. If you've already done it once, you're good. No need to do it again. If you want to do it again, you can. But if you feel like it went okay before, then you're good. No need to redo it. Focus more on the scored portions. That's what really matters. It's Me Dunny asks, what is the average score to get into law school, not a top law school? Well, the median LSAT score in general is a 151. Not saying that'll get you in, that's the score that people get. In terms of the score that gets you into a law school worth going to, I'd say at minimum a 160. But I'm not even sure this is the right question to be asking, right? We want to ask not what is enough to get in, but what score will help me maximize my options, get into the best possible school with the most scholarship money possible. So in a way, I think goal LSAT scores are silly because the answer is always to shoot for a 180, right? Why would you shoot for anything less? Why leave any points on the table? You could then shoot for a 180, and if you get, say, a 170, you think to yourself, maybe that's good enough. So you shoot for the moon, you land among the stars, right? So I'd say aim for the highest score possible. Don't leave any points on the table. Take no prisoners. Go for the gold. And if you get a 160 or 165, maybe that's good enough for what you need, but at least you aimed for your highest possible score to achieve your fullest potential. You could also set a goal by looking at the LSAT score medians of the schools that you're considering. So let's say you wanted to go to a Harvard, Yale, Stanford. What are their LSAT and GPA medians? What does it typically take to get in? Then you shoot for that. And if your GPA is lower, you aim for a higher LSAT to compensate. But you probably want, all else being equal, you probably want at least a 160, 165 to get decent outcomes. And if you don't hit your goal on your first take, then you retake. I see, okay, Sab was asking, I saw many of the people that scored in the low 160s in October scored a 170 plus in November. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, you can improve significantly on a retake. Your previous score is not dictating your future score or your potential. You're also saying, okay, Saba is saying October was torture. I mean, every test seems like torture when you're taking it, but in hindsight, once they release it, it may not be as bad as you thought initially. But always worth retaking if you think you could do better. Let's do some more drills, folks. What do you say? On to number 16, continuing with the flaw identification. A partner memo notes that one recent cross-border merger involved multiple regulatory agencies and required extensive document review. A newly proposed merger also involves multiple agencies. The memo concludes the new merger will require the same review in all ways. Let's ID the flaw. A, treats two mergers sharing one feature as similar in all significant ways. B, concludes no filing issues exist because none were named. C, assumes one merger's consultants will represent all consultants. Or D, infers the merger caused the review because both occurred together. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. Commit now, because you'll have to commit on test day. Better to get it wrong now and learn, so that you don't get it wrong on test day when it counts. And try to predict or rephrase the flaw in your own words if you can. Easier to spot it in the choices if you already have your own sense of what was wrong with it. So the first merger involved multiple agencies. The new merger also involves multiple agencies, and they're assuming that what happened for the first will also be true of the second. So because they're similar in one way, they're going to be similar in all the same ways, similar in all other ways as well. So it's an overextended analogy, assuming too much just because they have one thing in common. So just because they share one feature doesn't mean they're similar in all relevant ways. So A is the answer. Well done. I see Giovanna got it. Fantastic. Well done, Giovanna. I see Pashi got it. It's me, Dunny got it as well. Fantastic. The answer is in fact A. Nicely done. On to number 17. An internal note states that any student in the top 10% receives an invitation to the dean's reception. Because Vivian received one, the note concludes that she is in the top 10%. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. A, infers receiving the invitation guarantees the ranking. B, concludes no records contradict the ranking because none were reported. C, uses ranking info to generalize about all invitations. Or D, treats two students sharing one invitation as similar in all academic respects. So if top 10%, then invitation. Vivian got the invitation, therefore top 10%. So what are they doing here? They are confusing necessary and sufficient conditions. Being in the top 10% guarantees the invitation. Doesn't mean if you got the invitation, you were in the top 10%. Maybe there are other ways to get the invitation aside from being in the top 10%. So they are confusing necessary, sufficient conditions, which of course lines up with choice A, infers that receiving the invitation guarantees the ranking. The ranking guarantees the invitation, but A is reversing that. Improper reversal, confusing the conditions. And so for that reason, A is the answer. I see Max got it, Jess got it. Fantastic, well done. I see it's me, Dunny, Ciara, Jay, Anajan, Pashi, all saying A as well. Fantastic, the answer is in fact A. I see Max got it also, great Max. I see someone show C as in Charlie, but they are not generalizing here or overgeneralizing. They are assuming that what is necessary, getting the invitation, is sufficient when it was only told to be necessary. So for that reason, A is the answer. On to number 18. A case summary explains that the firm's file contains no evidence of income misreporting. It concludes the client did not misreport income. Let's ID the flaw. A, treats lack of evidence as proof misreporting never occurred. B, uses statements about other filings to generalize. C, infers one filing issue caused another because both involved the same attorney. Or D, treats two tax matters sharing one detail as similar in all respects. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So we have a situation where there was no evidence of income misreporting, and they're concluding, therefore, the client did not misreport income. Is it possible that the client did misreport income, even though we don't have the evidence to support that? Maybe the evidence was destroyed. Maybe they weren't able to find the evidence. Could be the client still misreported, but they just didn't have the evidence backing it up. So it could be the evidence that in fact there was misreporting without the evidence for it. So this is your classic absence of evidence fallacy. Absence of evidence is taken as proof of evidence of absence is the formal way to put it. Basically, it could still be that the misreporting happened even though we lack the evidence backing it up. So the answer is in fact A. Well done. Max and Giovanna both got it. Fantastic. I see that it's me, Dunny, Jay, Ciara, Anajan, Pashi also got it as well. Fantastic. The answer is A. Nicely done. On to number 19. A research memo reports that 3 randomly approached attendees at a sentencing reform forum expressed support for stricter mandatory minimum penalties. It concludes attendees generally support stricter penalties. Let's ID the flaw. A, concludes all attendees support penalties because 3 express support. B, treats lack of objections from 1 attendee as proof none exist. C, infers 2 forums sharing a topic are similar in all respects. Or D, claims 1 consultant's view represents all consultants. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to something. So we have here 3 as our sample, 3 randomly approached attendees. Then they're concluding that attendees generally support stricter penalties just because these 3 do. So limited sample, randomly approached, but pretty limited sample, only 3, not necessarily representative. What's true of these 3 may not be true of all attendees. We can't assume that all generally support stricter penalties just because 3 do. So they are overgeneralizing on the basis of a limited and perhaps unrepresentative sample. And so for that reason, choice A best describes the flaw. I see here Max got it and Giovanna got it. Both of you got it. Fantastic. I see Manhattan got it. Jay got it. It's me, Dunny. Pashi also got it as well. Fantastic. The answer is in fact A. Nicely done. On to number 20. A firm-wide review notes that associates using a new time tracking app frequently exceed monthly billable hour targets, while associates who do not use the app rarely exceed them. It concludes the app causes associates to exceed their targets. Let's ID the flaw. A, treats shared outcomes as proving identical work patterns. B, concludes the app causes targets to be exceeded because both occur together. C, generalizes from 3 associates to all associates. Or D, treats missing issues as proof no issues exist. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So we have an association here between using the app and exceeding billable hour targets. Therefore, the app causes associates to exceed their targets. So 2 things occur together, and they assume as a result that one causes the other. Could be a coincidence, of course. Could be a third variable. We don't know. But they're assuming causation when we only have correlation. So confusing correlation and causation, classic logical fallacies. I see here egomaniac, Jay, it's me, Dunny, Manhattan, Pashi, all saying B as in Bravo. I'm seeing Giovanna and Max also saying B as in Bravo as well. Fantastic, folks. B is in fact correct. Well done. We're 20 questions in so far. Out of these first 20, please drop in the chat how many you got right out of the number that you did. Give us a general sense of where you stand on these for your overall accuracy. And by the way, folks, if you like this kind of format, we do this every single weekday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific here on the YouTube channel, as well as on TikTok. We're not meeting tomorrow or Friday because of Thanksgiving, but we will reconvene on Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. So if you find this helpful, please, of course, spread the word. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these, and the algorithm doesn't really boost lives because they can't run ads during them. And so it only grows through your spreading the word. Please share it on your social, share it in your group chats, your forums, Reddit, Slack, Discord, wherever you talk to others studying for the LSAT. Really appreciate your support in spreading the word. Now, I know that, of course, a lot of folks took November LSAT, got your scores back today, thinking about January, February. And so if you're taking the LSAT in January or February, you're not late, you're not behind, and you're absolutely not out for this cycle. If you play your cards right, you can use the January or February LSAT to your advantage. And today, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to do just that. The biggest myth is that if you don't apply in September, you should wait a full year. And maybe 20 years ago that was true, but today it is no longer the case. The LSAT calendar has changed. It used to be offered 4 times a year. Now it's offered 8 times a year. And as a result, the entire admissions cycle shifted with it. Law schools are reacting to uncertainty. In the past couple of years, we've had LSAT format changes, logic games being removed, the Supreme Court banned affirmative action, LSAC moved from online testing to in-person, the rise of more frequent test dates, massive variability in applicant volume, more people applying. And so when law schools don't know what's coming, they don't make early aggressive decisions. They wait and see. They want to know who else is applying, what scores are going to look like, what will the pool look like this year. And that waiting period benefits you because schools hold seats open deeper into the cycle. They used to fill a lot of seats in November and December, but now because the landscape is unpredictable, they slow down. And as a result, applying later with a higher score is better than applying earlier with a lower score. In other words, a stronger score later is better than a weak score earlier. And it makes perfect sense. If giving yourself another month or two could get you 4 more points, 7 more points, 10 more points, that is the difference between a wait list and getting in versus getting a scholarship, and getting a scholarship versus getting a full ride. And that is real money, tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes over $200,000. And so if taking it in January or February gives you more time for a significant score increase, it's a good move. Now, LSAC, of course, changed the LSAT. They removed logic games and replaced it with a second score logical reasoning section. It's a huge gift for anyone taking the LSAT, especially late in the cycle, because you've got less material to study. And logical reasoning has a higher return on investment. It's worth double what it used to be. And so every gain you make in logical reasoning is doubled across the 2 sections. And logical reasoning has a limited set of patterns and common methods of reasoning. And once you learn those, you see them everywhere. They show up in necessary assumption, flaw, and inference, the 3 most common question types. And if you master those 3, you're already solving a huge portion of the test. And that's why late cycle test takers, January and February especially, often make their biggest score jumps in the final month. And so if you're taking it in January or February, here is the simplest, most effective study plan you can use. First, you build the skills first. You drill question types, drill logical reasoning patterns, and you drill your weak areas till they're no longer weak. Then, and only then, you move on to timed sections. Once the patterns feel familiar, you shift from untimed accuracy to timed performance. Timed individual sections train your pacing, your endurance, your transitions, and staying calm when you hit a tough question. Then you do weekly, full-length practice tests. This is a non-negotiable in the final month especially. A practice test is not about accuracy alone, it's about replicating test day conditions, sitting for the full test duration, managing your mental energy, handling stress, staying focused through 2 LR sections in a row back to back. And because most students procrastinate on full-length tests, you don't want that to be you because the tests matter more than the drills. Test day is not a drill. It is not enough to get the questions right. You got to get them right under test day conditions, considering pacing, time management, and endurance. Now, review is more important than just doing more questions. You improve by understanding why you got something wrong, why the right answer is right, why the tempting wrong answers were tempting, what pattern you missed, what assumption you overlooked, and where your timing slipped. This is where massive score increases happen. Now let's get concrete and specific so you know exactly where you stand. You take the January LSAT, scores come out end of the month. If you submit your applications the moment scores come out, you are perfectly within the main decision window. If you take it in February, scores come back at the end of that month. So if you have your essays ready, your letters of recommendation in, your applications polished, you can hit submit immediately and still be competitive. Law schools are going to see a strong LSAT score coming back in end of January or end of February, a complete polished application, and you deciding to optimize your score, not rushing things. Law schools understand that strategy. They see it every single year and they respect it. And again, remember the opportunity cost here. Waiting a full year means missing an entire year of attorney income. Let's say you're making $50,000 a year currently. After law school, you could be making $150,000. So waiting a year could cost you a difference of $100,000 in lost income. A delay of the LSAT 1 or 2 months does not compare to that, not even close. Now, if you're taking the LSAT in January or February, I want you to focus on drilling your weak areas immediately. Do not avoid them. Face them now, not next month. You also want to take a practice test every single week. This is the time. You also want to treat endurance like a skill. 2 logical reasoning sections back to back requires stamina. You also want to tighten your timing margins because pacing is everything. First 10 questions in logical reasoning, clean and quick. Middle 10, you slow down a bit, calm and methodical. And the final 5, you're disciplined with 0 panic. You also want to keep your decision-making emotion-free. If a question feels overwhelming, you skip it and you come back later. That alone could save you 4 to 7 points. So bottom line, the January LSAT's not too late. The February LSAT also is not too late. You can absolutely apply this cycle and still be competitive. You just got to have a clear plan, consistent practice, and the confidence to block out outdated advice. You've got the time, you've got the opportunity. Now, it's about making the most of the next few weeks. And if you want my help, of course, you can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me personally at unpluggedprep.com/start. Link below the video on YouTube, link in my bio on TikTok, or pinned in the chat here on YouTube as well. If the TikTok link is not working, just come on over to YouTube through my bio and you'll be able to access it there. Again, it's unpluggedprep.com/start. How was that, guys? Did you find that helpful? I know a lot of you were taking January and February, right? Just checking through the chat here to see other questions that came in. What LSAT did I get? So I personally scored a 175 up from 152. Took me an entire year, and at least half of that was a total waste of time. If I'd done it properly, I could have knocked it out in just a few months because the LSAT is a test of pattern recognition. If you could spot the tricks and traps, you can avoid them. It all comes down to understanding how the test makers think and seeing it from their perspective. And once you do that, everything changes. And that's why I'm here to help you out to avoid making the mistakes that I did. Sammy's asking, do law schools care if my first LSAT is a 146 and then I got a 172 months later? Is this hypothetical or actual? Did you really improve 24 points? If so, that's awesome. If not, let's shoot for that 170. But as for your question, ultimately, they don't care. The highest score is what matters. So the 170 is what counts. Maybe you took the 146 cold and didn't study for it. So 170 is what matters at the end of the day. Apply with the 170, be happy about it. If you want to write an addendum, you can, but you don't need to. Law schools know that people take the LSAT cold, and it's not a good idea to take it cold, of course, but what's done is done. They're not going to care. They do not average multiple scores on record. They only take the highest score. And so for that reason, whatever you've gotten in the past, it's worth retaking. Manhattan's asking, am I a lawyer too? No, I'm not. I would not have time to be a lawyer and do all my LSAT prep. I was, of course, considering law school because nobody does the LSAT for fun, right? But I ended up really enjoying it. I majored in political science. And so a lot of my friends who were also poli-sci majors were asking me for help with their LSAT prep. And so I started helping them out. They would buy me dinner. We'd go over LSAT questions together and started helping friends of friends. And it kind of just snowballed from there. And so here I am 20 years later, still doing this, and I love it. Jalen's asking, on law school apps, other than LSAT score and GPA, what makes one's application stand out? How many internships or externships? It's not really about the number of internships or externships. It's not really about the resume. Law school admissions is unlike undergrad admissions, where it's primarily just LSAT and GPA. Nothing else really matters, at least not significantly. So it's like your LSAT is first, GPA second, everything else is a distant third. And you might ask, why is it like that? Why is it so numbers driven when undergrad admissions is not numbers driven? And it's because of the US News Law School rankings. People really over index on them. Everyone cares because everybody else cares, which is dumb, but no one said things had to be smart. And so law schools are heavily incentivized to get their rankings up. And so they look to admit people who will boost their numbers. And so if you can apply to a school with your GPA or LSAT or both, ideally above the median, then law schools have reason to accept you because you will help them boost their numbers. And so I don't want you thinking about standing out in other parts of your application until you've locked in your numbers. If you had a 180 LSAT, a 4.0 GPA, and you were like, what else can I do? Then sure, do an internship or something. But if your numbers are a big question mark or they're low, then first let's get your numbers to be high. And once they are high, then we can look at other stuff. But I find that too many people are trying to procrastinate from studying for the LSAT by saying, oh, I'm going to go befriend my parents' friend who happens to be a judge, or I'm going to go try to get a law firm internship. It's busy work. It feels like you're doing something productive, but you're really avoiding the hard work of studying for this exam, because sending out resumes and cover letters or trying to network or add people on LinkedIn, it's maybe easier than doing LSAT questions. I don't know. Could that be the case? Is that possible? Am I striking a nerve here at all? I know for some people I am, and that's okay. Because ultimately, I just want you to win. And that comes down to looking at what actually matters. If you look at sites like Law School Data or you look at ABA 509 reports, it becomes incredibly clear that this process is numbers driven. So lock in the LSAT, lock in the GPA. And your GPA is probably pretty fixed in time at this point, because most of you watching this are probably not in high school or college freshmen. You're probably in the second half of college, if not graduated already. And so your undergrad GPA is probably pretty fixed in time at this point. But your LSAT is 1 day, 2.5 hours, that will outweigh all of undergrad combined. And so to marginally improve in one college class or even one semester is a small fraction of your undergrad GPA. And master's GPAs don't count, by the way. They're not factored in. It's only undergrad GPA and LSAT that matters numerically in terms of the data, the numbers, the stats. And so let's get you a 170 plus and then worry about internships. Letters of rec, of course, always good. So if you don't have good recommenders, start developing those relationships now. In other words, nurture the people who could become your recommenders in the future, but that could be your boss at work, volunteer coordinator, internship supervisor, community leader of some kind, professor. Go to office hours, ask questions in class, be that guy or that girl who raises their hand. Professors love that. And then get the letter. But otherwise, it's LSAT and GPA. Alana asks, I don't feel ready to go right after undergrad. What jobs are good for building skills for law school? So there's two things here. Are you not feeling ready to go, or are you not sure if you want to go? Because those are two different things. If you don't feel ready to go, my first question is, why don't you feel ready to go? What makes you think that you're not ready for law school? Law school is hard for everybody, and nobody's ready walking into it. Law school is unlike undergrad. It's a lot more reading, a lot more difficult, dense text to navigate. You could just read hard stuff. I don't know that too many jobs have you reading hard stuff in general. You could get a job as a paralegal. That would both expose you to the practice of law and also maybe expose you to some of those difficult, dense texts, maybe. It would help you determine better whether law school is right for you. Could be worth doing. But if you know law school is what you want to do, then you might just want to study for the LSAT, because that will give you difficult, dense texts to navigate, well worth exploring. And it will also improve your odds of getting in should you choose to go. Sammy, again, back on the 146, 170 thing. Would the 146 prior to my 170 not affect my chances, not even for T14s? Again, not really. They only care about the highest LSAT score on your record. Of course, better to have a 170 only than a 146 followed by a 170, but they're going to assume you took the 146 cold and that you decide to actually study after that and then get the 170. They have no reason to care. It's done. Don't worry about it. Move on. If you got the 170, you're great. Congratulations. Take it, run with it, put together strong essays. Solid questions here. I like this. Giovanna, relatedly, are you saying if you have a wide score discrepancy that there's no need to write an addendum? No, there is no need. You do not need to write an addendum for a score discrepancy. If it makes you feel better to do it, then sure, go ahead and do it. But the score tells the story. You can write whatever explanation you want, but they're not going to care. They have no reason to care. It is a numbers-driven process. And nobody likes to hear it doesn't matter, so law schools will tell you to write the essay, and so if you want to write the essay, write the essay. If it makes you feel better, they just want to get rid of you, honestly. They want you to leave them alone, so they tell you, yeah, sure, explain it, so that way you stop pestering them. But there's nothing you can say that will make a difference, because the numbers are what are factored into the ABA. They go to the ABA for the 509 reports. They go to US News. So write it if you want. Make it concise, clear. Don't over-explain. Don't make excuses. Just state the facts and tell the truth. Matter of fact, that's it. User 6102 asks, I got a 149, then a 148, but I PT in the late 160s. What do you think is going on? So first off, I'm sorry to hear that your score dropped a point, especially when your practice test average is much, much higher. I mean, we're talking a 20-point discrepancy. So when students' scores drop from practice tests to the actual, could be nerves, could be anxiety, could be that you were not properly simulating test day conditions. So I would look into all of that. First off, did you have a bad proctor? Did you have tech issues? Did you take it in person or remotely, and was the condition less than optimal? How many practice tests did you take going into this? Were they strictly timed? Were you taking breaks, checking your phone, getting a snack, talking to your friend or your family, or were you buckled down and focused with zero distractions? A lot of times, the practice tests are taken in favorable, easy, loose conditions, and the actual, of course, isn't like that. So you get a drop because your practice was not even a proper representation of your abilities. You were getting an unfair, inflated boost. So those are all the things that it could be. I don't know what it actually is, of course, because I don't know you. You're just someone commenting on my live stream here, which is awesome. If you want to talk through it more, of course, we could get into the particulars. And the best way to do that, of course, is to book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. Link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, or in my bio on TikTok. It's unpluggedprep.com/start. You can book a free call with me, and we could talk through your situation personally, get into the details, and help you craft a plan of attack so that you can avoid experiencing a similar drop in the future. Again, that's unpluggedprep.com/start if you want to book that free call with me. Moises asks, I got a 159. My score goal was a 160. I plan on attending in Texas, and I'm not too picky about the school. My goal school's meeting is 161. Should I retake? My GPA is a 397, by the way. Okay, so your GPA is awesome. It's probably above the median for the schools you're looking at in Texas. So you're above median on the GPA. You're a couple points short of the 161. Should you retake? So I guess one question I have is, What was your practice test average going in? And what are your next 6 weeks looking like? In other words, if your practice test average was above a 160 or 159, then you have reason to think that you might be able to do better on a retake without too much additional work. If your PT average was on that 159 or below, then you might need to do some more studying to raise the score. The reason I ask about the next 6 weeks is because you have 6 weeks between now and the January LSAT. And so if you could study during these 6 weeks, then you could get your score up. So your PT average was ranging around where you got, but could have been a little bit higher. My thought is you might want to retake because you could do better. You scored on the low end of your PT average. You could have gotten 4 points higher potentially. Your next 6 weeks are open. So cool. So buckle down, study, raise your PT average going in, get yourself into the mid 160s, if not high 160s, and you might get a few points higher on test day. And that's going to improve your odds. And the cool thing about, you mentioned that you're not too picky about the school. What I like about that is if you're not picky about where you go, you can then be picky about scholarship money. So you have, when you're choosing law schools, you have scholarships as one consideration, and you have prestige, like ranking, brand name, all that. And so let's say somebody is balancing, let's say you have a 4.0 and a 175. Great numbers, right? So you could go to a T14 law school, but maybe not get too much scholarship money because T14s can afford to be stingy. They don't have to give out tons of scholarships, especially if your numbers are decent, but not like perfect, like 180. So what you could do is you could say to yourself, you know what? I want to go to a lower ranked school and get more scholarship money, then go to a higher ranked school with less scholarship money, because law school ain't cheap, right? We're talking $80,000 a year, maybe $250,000 for 3 years. It's a lot of money when you pay sticker. So what if you did not have to pay sticker? How cool would that be? What if you could go to law school for free? Or even better, what if you could get paid to go to law school? And that is a thing, actually. They have stipends, meaning if you have really high numbers and the school really wants you, you could not only negotiate a full ride where you pay $0, but they could actually give you a living stipend to help offset rent, food, that's clothing, that sort of thing. And as Christopher points out, there's also the big, beautiful bill, the elimination of Grad Plus loans, meaning starting in July of next year. I'm glad you brought this up, Christopher. Thank you. If you're applying to law school to start next fall, which I imagine most folks are starting next fall or beyond, right? Because this year's already begun. There's a limit to how much you can borrow. And so what you want to do is get merit scholarship money by having high numbers to offset your tuition, to reduce the loans that you have to take out. And then you get a full ride plus stipend. You're not taking out loans. You're not paying anything. They're paying you, and you're getting a JD for free. But the only way to get that kind of amazing outcome is by getting numbers that are really great. So you apply with a GPA above median and an LSAT above median as well. And the higher above the median you are, the more they're going to want you because the more impressive you seem. And so, as you mentioned, Moises, your GPA is outstanding, 397, super high, above median for any of the schools in Texas, I would think. You've just got to get your LSAT up. As you said, next 6 weeks you're open, so there's no excuse really. Study for the LSAT full time for the next 6 weeks, put in a solid 4 to 5 hours a day. Not more, because I don't want you to burn out. I also want you to maintain quality of life, sleep, diet, exercise, relaxation, quality of life maintained, so you can perform at your best. You're also telling me, you wrote here, I see this new comment, I financially support myself and have worked 3 jobs to get through undergrad, so I highly value scholarships. So yeah, so all the more reason to get the LSAT up to get more money. You want to go in Texas, you're not picky about the school. There are a ton of schools in Texas, a wide range, some higher ranked, some lower ranked, of course. You might not want to relocate at all. Texas is a big state, of course, but you can you can blanket Texas, apply to every school in the state. There's at least 6 to 10 schools, right? I mean, SMU, UT Austin, among others, right? You have a lot of options. Apply to all of them, blanket them, and then play them off each other. Meaning that you negotiate hard. You apply to every school in the state, and you say to them, but then when they come back to you, you say, I really want to go to your school, but this other school offered me more, and I have financial limitations. Can you meet or exceed what they offered me? And you just keep negotiating back and forth, and you hold out for what you want. Cast a wide net. It's a game, but you're a future lawyer, so negotiate like one. And with it, you have a great GPA. If you can get high 160s or beyond, you could very well get a full ride. Sophia's asking, hi, I'm a freshman now. Got to take the LSAT by junior year. What should I do to start? So first, you've got 2 years at least. It's a bit early to start. You don't need to start now. I would say first and foremost, keep your GPA high and enjoy college and explore if law school is something you actually want to do. Law school, like I said before, is GPA plus LSAT. But for now, at least establish your GPA. Get that solid, get as close to a 4.0 as you can. Take classes that are both going to give you A's, because if GPAs or medians are real, GPA inflation is real. And so you do have to have a great GPA, as you're saying here. And then once you've gotten that solid, gotten your routine down, you're only still in first semester, I'm assuming, right? So it's still early. Get your bearings down. Then if you're sure law school is what you want to do, then you start studying little by little. But even 6 months to a year is enough. You don't need to start actual LSAT now. I'd say instead, enjoy college, explore the legal profession, and make sure this is what you really want to pursue. If you're looking for pre-LSAT prep material, you could read publications like The Economist, Scientific American. If you're looking for a book, I really like A Rule Book for Arguments. That's a really solid short text on typical logical fallacies. It's not LSAT specific, but it's LSAT adjacent. It's a good way to get started with this. But for now, I'd say just get a high GPA and make sure that law school is actually what you want to do. Then circle back with me in a couple of years and we could pursue the LSAT then. Thanks for the great questions, folks. Let's do some more drills if you're game. On to number 21 here. Lewis spoke with one junior associate who prefers the new billable hour software. He concludes all junior associates prefer it. Let's ID the flaw. A, infers one person's preference must follow from a shared outcome. B, claims the software caused preferences merely because they appear together. C, Lewis generalizes from one junior associate to all junior associates. Or D, claims the software lacks problems because no complaints were documented. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So he spoke with one, and he concludes all. Overgeneralization, unrepresentative sample, taking what one did as indicative of what all did, or what one prefers as what all prefer. I see folks are nailing it. Awesome. The answer is in fact C as in Charlie. Generalizing from one to all. Giovanna got it. Max got it. Fantastic. I see that NT20 got it. Eden got it. Jay got it. Miss Raquel got it. Fantastic, folks. Well done. On to number 22. Every top 10 student receives an invitation to the dean's reception. Because Vivian receives one, the note concludes she is top 10%. Let's ID the flaw. A, Vivian infers she is top ranked solely because she received the invitation. B, generalizes from one invited student to all invited students. C, claims lacking evidence of rankings means no rankings were assigned. Or D, asserts ranking success was caused by the invitation because they appear together. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to something. So if top 10, then gets the invitation. Vivian got the invitation, therefore she's in the top 10%. What are they doing, of course? They are confusing necessary and sufficient condition, improperly reversing conditions. Every is your sufficient condition indicator, but they are concluding that it is a necessary indicator. Not the case, of course. Going backwards on the arrow, that's improperly done, bad inference. So the answer is A. I see Max got it. Giovanna got it. Fantastic. I see here that Jay and Eden got it as well. Fantastic, well done. By the way, folks, if you want to discuss the drill that we've already moved on from, we're going to keep going forward, but you can, of course, book a free LSAT lesson with me to talk through any of these questions. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start. Link below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube or in my bio as well. Number 23, a compliance officer found no disciplinary complaints against Jimmy and concludes he has never engaged in improper client solicitation. Let's ID the flaw. A, infers all client issues exist because one database entry appeared. B, claims conduct caused discipline solely because the discipline often follows conduct. C, asserts two employees match simply because they share database access. Or D, concludes Jimmy never acted improperly solely because no complaints were recorded. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. Commit now, because of course you have to commit on test day. Better to get it wrong now so that you learn so you don't get it wrong on test day. So they found no complaints against him, and they've concluded that he's never done anything wrong. Maybe nobody complained. Maybe there's no evidence, but he still engaged in improper solicitation. So lack of evidence doesn't mean that he didn't actually do the thing. This is your classic absence of evidence fallacy, which lines up, of course, with choice D as in Delta. Fantastic. I see here Max and Giovanna both got it. That's great. I see that Eden, John, Essie, Yanni, Jill, NT20 all say D. D is in fact correct, folks. Well done. On to number 24. One LSAT taker completed a prep course and scored above the 95th percentile. Another completed the same course, and the report concludes they share all relevant traits and results. Let's ID the flaw. J, A, generalizes from one result to all test takers. B, infers two test takers share all traits merely for completing the same course. C, claims scoring patterns were caused by the course solely due to repeated correlation. Or D, concludes the course lacks issues because none were reported. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So one completed, scored high, another did the same course, so they're concluding they share all relevant traits and results. So they are overgeneralizing the similarities just because they have one particular specific thing in common. This is an overextended analogy. See, Max is saying I went too fast, LOL. That's the thing, right? We got to slow down. Because if you read too quickly, you miss stuff, you get it wrong. Don't rush, don't overthink it, but don't rush either. You want to find that happy medium. Understand the argument fully, predict the answer in your own words, then look for it in the choices. Of course, B as in Bravo is the answer, overextending the analogy. Just because they're similar in one way doesn't mean they're similar in all relevant ways. They could just have one thing in common and have that be it. So the answer is B as in Bravo. I see Giovanna got it. Max got it. Fantastic. I see Z, Joseph, J, Jill, NT20, Yanni, Key, Z, all saying B as in Bravo. B is in fact correct, folks. Well done. On to number 25. Whenever Donna stays late reviewing merger contracts, the firm closes a major deal the next week. The partner concludes her late reviews cause those deals. Let's ID the flaw. A, infers all contract reviewers behave alike because one reviewer stayed late. B, asserts Donna meets every requirement because she was involved in a deal. C, claims her late reviews cause deals merely from repeated correlation. Or D, concludes contract issues never occurred because none were documented. When you've got your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to something. So we have an association here between staying late and the firm getting a deal. Therefore, they say the late reviews cause those deals. So there's an association between two things. They conclude, therefore, one thing caused the other thing. Correlation, causation. See a lot of folks getting in the chat. Awesome, love to see it. So yes, this is of course lining up with choice C as in Charlie. I see here Max got it, Giovanna got it. Fantastic. I see that. Let's see. Jay, Yanni, Z, NT20, Jill all saying C. Yes, C as in Charlie is in fact correct. Well done, folks. That's the answer. So we're 25 in so far. Out of these 25, please drop in the chat how many you got right out of the number that you did. Give us an overall sense of your accuracy on these, where you stand, so I know how to adjust difficulty levels on these going forward. Y'all are doing great on these. Some of these are tough, but you're getting them right, which I love to see. And by the way, feel free to keep dropping any questions here around this in terms of, at law school, LSAT prep admissions. Happy to talk you through your situation and help you craft a plan of attack going forward. I see Sophia was asking about a 3+3 law program. So that's like a feeder where you do undergrad and law school combined in 6 years rather than 7 years. The one thing you want to be careful about in these combined programs is that you don't have the same scholarship negotiation leverage as you would otherwise, because they're using the undergrad as a feeder into the law school, and they know they kind of have you pre-committed already. And so it's good for the security of getting into law school, but not good for getting scholarship money. And so just tread carefully is what I'm saying here. These programs don't have the best financial outcome for you in terms of what you pay in tuition. If you are inelastic in your law school demand, meaning that you don't care, you just want to go and you don't care what you pay, then different story, of course. But most folks, finances do matter. And so just think carefully, what are they going to offer you in scholarships when you're already essentially committed? I see regular apple juice fans saying things didn't go so well today. I'm sorry to hear that. If you want to talk through your situation, you can leave some comments with questions or details. I'm happy to do what I can for you here. If you want to go a bit deeper in a more personal conversation, that goes for anybody, by the way. You can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. Link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, and in my bio on TikTok as well. Happy to have a free one-on-one call with you and talk through your situation, help you craft a plan of attack for your LSAT prep whenever you're taking it, whether it's January, February, April, June, or beyond. I see Max is 10 for 10 on these drills. Giovanna's 20 for 22. Fantastic. That's really solid there. Jay's 18 for 25. Also pretty solid. Well done. Yeah, great questions here, folks. I'll stay as long as people keep having questions here. I see Z's asking, did they actually drop the logic games from the LSAT? Yes, they actually did. The last logic games administration was June 2024. Starting with August 2024, so a little over a year ago, they dropped logic games and replaced it with a second score logical reasoning section. Funny story, actually. It's the result of a lawsuit. A blind test taker sued LSAC, saying he was at an unfair disadvantage because he couldn't benefit from diagramming in logic games the way that other test takers could. LSAC would not accommodate him. They refused to be flexible, which I think was not really cool of them, because logic games, you kind of need to diagram. I mean, I can't imagine doing games without diagramming. And so for a blind test taker, I could certainly understand their contention that they were at a disadvantage for this, but LSAC, they're really sticklers and inflexible. And as a result, they got sued. They ultimately settled the lawsuit, and they, as part of the settlement, they agreed to remove logic games for everybody, essentially forever. And so starting in August of last year, they replaced logic games with a second scored logical reasoning section. And so now the LSAT has 2 scored logic game sections. I'm sorry, misspeaking here. 2 scored logical reasoning sections, 1 scored reading comp section, and 1 unscored extra section of either logical reasoning or reading comp. You don't know which section's unscored during the exam, so you got to give it your equal effort on all sections regardless. There's also the unscored writing sample, which I spoke about earlier. They indicated they will start scoring the writing sample at some point in the next few years, but at least through June of 2026, it will not be scored. If they do score it, they will announce that far in advance. Some folks liked logic games, some folks did not. So some are doing better without it, some are doing worse without it, but of course it is what it is. All you can do is look ahead and go forward. Apple Juice is saying, I went from 170 practice test to 158. Don't even know what happened. I'm very sorry to hear that, Apple Juice. When people's scores drop, it's usually a combination of nerves, anxiety, tech issues, bad proctor. or improperly simulating test day conditions. So do you think any of those things might have been at play? Again, what could it be? Bad proctor, tech issues, nerves, anxiety, not properly simulating test day conditions? Or were you sick? Did you not sleep well the night before? Were there distractions? A lot of potential factors. If you can share more details, I can try to talk you through it a little bit. Or, of course, you could book the call with me to talk through your situation more just through the link in my bio, unpluggedprep.com/start. Open invitation to anybody out there watching this now or later. I'm happy to meet with you one-on-one and talk through your situation, help you craft a plan of attack going forward. You're saying nerves were a factor. Okay, so in terms of dealing with nerves, a couple of things you could do. One is more timed practice tests under real world simulated test conditions. So that test day itself ideally feels like just another run through and you've done it all before. And January is totally worth it, by the way. You've got 6 weeks. Plenty of time to improve between now and then over the next 6 weeks to take more practice tests. Maybe do some daily mindfulness meditation, just 5-10 minutes focusing on your breath. And then, of course, raising your baseline. If you can raise your baseline average going in, so if you can, instead of a 170 on one test or an average, maybe you raise it to a 173, 175 so that you're not dropping as much on test day or you're still ending up in a pretty good place. But the January LSAT's not too late. You could even take it in February and still apply this cycle. Totally fine. Claude's asking any free websites to study on. I mean, there's lsac.org, of course, lsac.org. You have Law Hub on there. Best source for actual LSAT practice material, of course, on the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel. I've got free lessons covering every section, every question type in depth. Click the link in my TikTok bio to go over to the YouTube channel. I've got playlists and courses on there covering everything in depth. I've been going pretty hard on YouTube for the past 7 years or so. So I've got thousands of videos there, full-length class recordings, lots of classes doing drills like what we're doing today, but also full-length lessons on everything LSAT law school admissions. Happy to help you out and talk through your situation. I see Anansa joining on the stage in the backstage. Anansa, do you want to chat? If you do, just unmute yourself and I'll add you to the stage. We could talk through your situation if you'd like.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Anansa, what's going on?
So I'm actually in a similar position to, I believe, the person who you're referring to, Moses, right? Regarding like getting a little bit below a median for a school that like I'm interested in. And I was thinking about even like I wanted to cancel the score out of like frustration, which I know makes no sense because it's a respectable score. But yeah, I'm just considering what my options would be. Like if I apply now and the score is not in the median or their upper margins, then the chances of getting a scholarship are low, right? So if it's a scholarship that I want, then I should probably retake and reapply, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So that's pretty much the boat that I just find myself in. So just letting that.
Yeah, no, it's a great point that you're raising here. I mean, it's a common situation for a lot of folks. I mean, the best way to improve your standing at this stage here is, I mean, just get a higher LSAT and retake. And so raise your baseline going into the next one. You've got 6 weeks till January. Would you consider taking January?
Yeah, I would consider taking it in January.
What's your schedule like? What else do you have going on?
I mean, right now I've been just drilling still, because I didn't feel 100% confident after the test. So I immediately like enrolled in another program. So I'm practicing on the areas that were giving me some difficulty. So I definitely think that I have time to focus on it. I just also wanted to be like realistic with myself. Like generally speaking, like how many points does somebody really improve within 6 weeks? Like if I'm able to dedicate, let's say 10 hours a day to study and I'm focusing
Okay,
on
so
those
10 hours is too much. We don't want you to burn out. So I would drop it down a little bit.
Okay.
Even 4 or 5 hours a day could be plenty of time to improve significantly over the next 6 weeks. And you could improve a lot. I mean, if there's a blind spot that you have, if you're under a particular misconception regarding a certain question type, certain method of reasoning, if you change a single strategy around pacing or time management or endurance, that alone could unlock 5-10 points. And that would be well worth it, of course.
Yeah, for sure. definitely would. Okay, so maybe that's what it is. Like I'm constantly like following live classes all day. I'm on podcasts, and that's why it's like reaching up to like 10 hours a day. Like I'm just fully invested in this, but again, I don't want to get burned out. That can have like a negative impact.
Awesome. You're clearly dedicated and committed. I love to see it. I mean, that drive will get you really far. I'll distinguish between hard studying and then passively absorbing or consuming information, right? So, I mean, sitting down, doing a practice test, drilling questions, joining a Zoom class like what we have in the program. I mean, all of that is really valuable and that's serious studying. In contrast, if you're putting on one of my podcasts in the background while you're commuting or something, that's immersing yourself in this LSAT prep world, but I wouldn't count that as studying in the same way, right? It's more you're kind of half there, but you're just absorbing and immersing yourself in this world, but you're not looking at questions. They're two different things, right?
Yeah, they are. Good
But
point.
still, I mean, I think what you're doing is great though, and I'd encourage you to keep it up. Just make sure you're maintaining balance and allowing time for quality of life so that you don't fall apart. You want to be well rested, you want to sleep, you want to socialize and see friends, all the other stuff that keeps you at 110%.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, but you're doing all the right things. Keep at it. And of course, if you need anything, you feel free to reach out and I'm happy to help.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Be well, Nats. Take care. A great question. Yeah, a lot of folks are in the same boat, right? But I mean, the thing is that even if you could only improve 3 to 5 points over the next 6 weeks, it's well worth going for that retake because a couple more points could make a massive difference, especially if you're on the threshold. Like Moises was at a 159, I think. Just the optics of a 160 look way better, even though it's a single point. Or 169 versus a 170, even better, right? And that's irrational because a point is a point. Like going from 160 to 161 is the same as going from 159 to 160, except it's not because it looks different. And so the 159 versus the 160, they look very different. And if you look at the data, admissions officers themselves are not immune from those optics. And so the data shows that getting to that next threshold of that next decile or whatever you call it in stats world, like the next 10, makes a big difference. So yeah, well worth retaking just for a few points more. Javon is asking, should I start my apps now and be ready to drop them when my January score comes in? I've got everything in place, rec letters, personal statements, etc. Yeah, definitely. I mean, start now. I mean, what you didn't mention is your essays. So you have everything. I'm guessing, do you have everything else in place, but the essays are the missing piece? Because yeah, those are still something to work on, right? I mean, the essays do take times. I would put them through multiple rounds of revision and drafts to get them as perfect as possible. Do that on the side as a break from your LSAT studying, of course. But yeah, I would definitely work on those. You're saying you've done them now already also. So yeah, refine them a bit more, perfect them. But yeah, have them ready to go so that when January scores come out, you'll be ready to hit submit. You've also got, of course, a couple of weeks between take and January getting your score back, right? So January LSAT's around, say, it's running January 7th through 10th. Then scores come out, I think it's the 28th of January. So you'll still have another 2.5 weeks to work on it. You're saying you've got everything. So I'm a little confused. Why are you saying should you start now, but you already have everything? So it sounds like you're done. But in short, refine, revise, improve, perfect over these next 2 months till January scores drop. And then in the meantime, as a break from your LSAT prep, you work on your applications. Good that you're planning ahead though. That's cool. Shoefly's asking, I forgot to do my writing sample till yesterday. Any way to get my sample approved so I can see my score? Okay, so this is a good one. So yes, you do have to do the writing sample in order for LSAC to give you back your score. It's a way that they enforce you actually completing the writing sample. And so you've done it yesterday, I gather. Now you just gotta wait. It sucks. I'm sorry, but those are the rules. For everybody else, learn from Shoefly's experience and don't wait to do your writing sample. Don't delay it too long. You can do it up to approximately a week prior to your LSAT, and then you can do it anytime afterwards, but they won't give you your score until your writing sample is complete and approved. So do it. My recommendation is a day or two after your official LSAT, meaning between now and say you're taking in January, you study for the January LSAT, you take the January LSAT on say the 10th, take a day off because you deserve it, do the writing sample on the 12th. And that way you still got 2 weeks for them to review it and approve it for security reasons or whatever, making sure that your friend wasn't in the background giving you the answer or something. And then you've got your score on time and you're not delayed. But at this point, you're now just waiting on LSAC and you just got to wait in line. Lisa's asking, I test in January. How many timed sessions should I do per week starting now? I'm going to interpret this as saying how many timed exams should you do per week? 1 or 2, probably for most people. 1 per week if you're working or you're in school, you have other obligations. 2 per week if you have a bit more free time, and meaning you're just working part-time or studying part-time. You want to get as many under your belt as possible without burning out, and you also want to have sufficient time to review in depth. And also, yes, you want to have time, as we're saying, you want to review why you got the questions wrong exactly. So using that Socratic review method to drill down to exactly what you're getting wrong and why, so that you can avoid making the same mistakes again. So don't do 5 exams a week because you won't have time to review 5 a week, and you also don't want to do exams on consecutive days because you don't want to burn out. See I'm just scanning through here for other questions. Javon is asking, can they see when you start applying? They're not really, I mean, I assume if they were to dig into your file, they could see when you started the application, but they're not going to look at that until you actually hit submit. They don't have time for that. They have too many applications. Like I mentioned earlier, application numbers are up 50% over the past 2 years. And so they're inundated with applications. They're not stalking you, usually, anyway. But yeah, so I mean, basically just, you could start the application now, but you're not going to complete it until your score comes back. You want to wait to hit submit until you actually have the score on record so that you know where you're at. Channing Terry asks, what if you had a proctored issue, or what I think is a proctored issue, what should I do? Well, how bad was it? What happened? If it was catastrophic, then you probably want to cancel your LSAT and retake it. If it was a minor inconvenience, maybe you want to just let it rest. I mean, ultimately, is it worth making a stink? All they're going to do for you is let you retake. They're not going to add points to your score just because the proctor was bad. I wish they would, but they're not going to. If the proctor was bad, they might give you a free retake, typically, but you're not going to say that now. You would report that around the time that it happened. So let's say you take the LSAT on a Wednesday, you report it that day or the next day, and then they say, okay, Channing, you can take the LSAT you can do a free makeup in a week. That's the only compensation they can offer you. Channing's updating us here. He says, I think it's a he or she, I'm sorry for getting that wrong. I had to exit my application and it took around 30 minutes for me to get back in. I'm not sure they got all my answers. Well, that's a problem, right? If you're not sure that everything was logged, that would tank your score, right? So in my case, that I would say definitely report it, probably cancel. John's got some advice for you saying, finish the exam and report to LSAC. Yeah, so I mean, if you're in that situation in the middle of it, you want to finish it just in case that everything is getting logged, and hopefully you will be done with the LSAT that day, but you do want to report it. And if the exam was not completed and not everything was logged, then you might just want to retake. Channing's saying, I've taken it 3 times and this one was way lower. So yeah, this definitely impacted you in some way negatively. Either not everything was logged or it just kind of threw you off, but all you could do is report it and then you retake it next time it's offered. In this case, at this point, I mean, your next chance is January. Loving these questions here. Appreciate all your great engagement here, all your thoughts here. I love doing this. And so, by the way, folks, I do this every day. Usually not this early to accommodate folks on the West Coast. Usually we do this at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. Every single weekday, we're doing LSAT Law School Admission Strategy drill sets. We're not doing tomorrow or Friday because of Thanksgiving. We're going to reconvene on Monday afternoon, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, on YouTube and TikTok, covering everything else at admissions. If you find this helpful, follow, like, subscribe. Please spread the word about this as well. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these lives, and the algorithm doesn't really boost them because they can't run ads during them. And so it only grows through you spreading the word and sharing this on your socials, following me here, spreading the word in any group chats or Discords, forums, Reddit, group chats, wherever you connect with others studying for the LSAT. Really appreciate your support, folks, and all your great questions here. I'm going to wrap it up now for the day and sign off for Thanksgiving, folks, but I appreciate you all staying on. I'll see you all Monday afternoon. And again, if you find this helpful, please spread the word. You could also book that free LSAT lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. Link below the video on YouTube. Link in bio on TikTok. Again, I'll put this in the chat here on TikTok for those who missed it. Unpluggedprep.com/start for that free LSAT tutoring lesson. I'm happy to help out anybody out there studying for the LSAT now or later. Really appreciate your support. I'll see you all next weekend, next Monday. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy all. I'll talk to you all soon. Be well.